Check.
No,
Favor?
I don't want.
Yeah.
Did you get a?
Oh, that's okay. You are.
And Iris.
So, yeah, okay, let me,
Yeah, take it. We're good to go. On this end. So
Yeah,
my concern.
But I just bought
A bigger boat.
I just bought a plastic RV.
only one money pit at a time.
We were doing it for Deborah's login, so I don't know what.
it wasn't that big.
Thing is supposed to go 35. And they'll go to 10.
So it wasn't letting me join the Zoom meeting from here. It was saying that this meeting was scheduled for July 7th. Oh, you wanted. But if I go on here, okay.
Icon. I should see.
Nobody to your right. Spread out.
I'm gonna have to dodge the.
Oh, I thought you were reading the house plan.
Thank you.
Yep.
No, there's snacks now. We got upgraded.
Oh, I know, we demanded at the end.
Like, this is crap. I'm gonna be here till 8, not made me.
Well, with that one removed, instead
You
we
can
had
use that.
3, now we're down 2 today. So that'll get us out a little bit better.
Yeah.
I'm still fighting.
Number 3.
Is that the Lusher Fort? It's not gonna be pretty.
I have no.
There will be blood.
Ira, how's it going?
Good, you? Oh, you don't have to pick it up, don't worry.
Hereby call to order the Thursday, July 21st, 2022 Frisco Planning Commission meeting. Cheryl, will you please take roll?
Commissioner Franken,
Here.
I'm sorry, before roll, my bad. We please swear in Planning Commissioner Gleason?
Hello, Patrick.
Hello.
Are you ready to be sworn in?
Indeed.
All right, if you could repeat after me. I state your name.
Patrick Gleason.
Do affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
Do affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Colorado,
the Constitution of the State of Colorado,
and the laws of the State of Colorado,
and the laws of the State of Colorado,
and will faithfully perform to the best of my ability the duties of the Office of Planning Commissioner.
and will faithfully perform to the best of my abilities the duties of the position,
Office
the office of planning commission,
upon which I am about to enter.
upon which I'm about to.
Thank you, Patrick. Congratulations.
Thank you. Cheryl, now will you please call roll?
Commissioner Franken,
Here.
Commissioner Gleason,
Here.
Commissioner Lesnes,
Here.
Commissioner Potter,
Here.
Commissioner Stabile,
Here.
Commissioner Tain,
Here.
Commissioner Withrow.
Here. Thank you. Thank you, Cheryl. At this time, I will open the floor to public comment. I would like to note that if you are here for 80 West Main Street, that agenda item has been continued. So
Until when?
August 4th. So if you have comment, I don't want you to have to sit and wait for it. Of course.
I do have one question about it. It says in our bylaws of our HOA that before anything's officially done and signed off, that the final deal will be sent to the HOA for their sign off. Is that true? Or you're gonna do that, right?
That is true. There's a little bit of a conflict in your PUD. On the planner on the project that.
For now, okay.
All right, is there any public comment on this at this time that is not on tonight's agenda item? This is your opportunity to speak. I'm seeing nobody here in the chamber, so if you are online and wish to make public comment, please raise your hand. Any, Cameron?
Seeing none here.
I'm seeing no public comment at this time, so I will close the public comment portion of tonight's meeting and move on to agenda items. Our first agenda item is planning file number MAJ-22-0002, a final review of the major site plan application for a proposed multifamily residential development located at 307 South Fifth Avenue, Lot 123, Block 26, Frisco Town Sub. Applicant Abigail Plain House representing Harris Properties LLC. I will turn it over to you, Emily.
Thanks, Kelsey. I'm going to share my screen real quick.
No, I'm good. I have two jobs. Thank you. Only live once.
So we're both in as down Frisco and the host is right here. And I just don't know what her name is to give her permission. If this permission. Oh. it's old on top.
No, you can.
You should have shared.
All right, here we go. So like Madam Chair mentioned, we are here tonight to review 307 South Fifth Avenue, a major site plan final review. The project is located at 307 South Fifth Avenue and involves the construction of 4 units in 2 separate but adjoining buildings. The subject property is located on the west side of South Fifth Avenue and contains an existing single-family home and detached garage. The structures will be demolished prior to the proposed construction. All 4 of the proposed units contain 3 bedrooms, a 2-car garage, and various building elements such as balconies, decks, and patios. Access is from Teller Street Alley and Frisco Street Alley. The subject property is zoned residential high density, and the application was reviewed against those zoning district requirements. The application meets the applicable zoning requirements related to density, setbacks, lot coverage, and height. The site consists of lots 1, 2, and 3, Block 26 Frisco Town Site, which are considered one development site for the purpose of analyzing development standards. The applicant will be required to consolidate the lots by either vacating the lot lines or through a townhome plat. This is listed as a condition of approval. The grading and drainage plans have been reviewed by the town engineer and Public Works Department and are subject to the town standards. As listed as a condition of approval, the applicant will be required to submit updated plans to address the comments from both agencies. As far as access, the application meets the maximum driveway width requirements. The applicant will, however, have to request waivers from Public Works for the minimum spacing between driveways. According to town standards, no two driveways shall be within 30 feet of one another unless unachievable due to topography or lot size. The northern access drive is approximately 26 feet from the drive to the west, and the southern access is approximately 28 feet from the drive to the west as well. Tandem parking is also proposed, and if the Planning Commission finds that the layout of parking is functional and meets the criteria, the application meets the tandem parking standard. The application meets the standards for parking, snow storage, landscaping, and outdoor lighting. Moving on to facade standards. At the April 7th meeting, the Planning Commission discussed the duplication of the project and the opportunity to change up geometries and materials to give the needed variation. In response, the applicant has modified the facade to include more variation and uses a minimum of 4 of the building elements on each facade, including balconies, offsets and insets, change in material, and variation in window sizes. Additionally, the applicant has removed duplicity from the units, meeting the facade standards. As far as roof standards, the application materials illustrate a variety of roof forms, including elements at varying pitches and rooftop decks appearing as flat roof lines. The proposed building roofs are a combination of 412 and 612 pitches, meeting the requirements. The applicant is using gables at varying angles to add visual relief. If the Planning Commission finds that the architectural elements along the ridgeline meet the intent of the code, then the application meets the standard. Moving on to material standards, the proposed materials include random width vertical board-to-board siding in gray and brown tones, board and batten vertical siding in a brown color, horizontal lap siding, cedar fascia window trim painted dark brown, and accent railings in a dark matte brown metal. The proposed materials and colors meet the standards. Next, we have the bulk standards. The applicant originally had a total of 300 cubic feet of encroachment proposed on their application materials, and staff had asked for further clarification on their calculations. This is listed as a condition of approval in the staff report and is what is illustrated in the staff report attachments. The applicant has since provided updated calculations and elevations as of Tuesday, July 19th. So this is after the staff report went out. And with that, they made modifications to 2 parapets on the east elevation, which reduces the total bulk plane encroachments to 278 cubic feet. These are the changes that are highlighted in the slides in front of you. So as you can see, the elevation that was included in the staff report, and then below that, the updated elevations as of July 19th. And again, here is the same eastern elevation, just with the 3D renderings. And again, you can see the changes circled in red. And then one more slide here, just showing further clarification on the updated encroachments, including the calculations of each encroachment for a total of 278 cubic feet. If the Planning Commission finds that the proposed encroachments provide substantial architectural relief, then the application meets the block plane standards. And lastly, I have the proposed findings, which were found in the staff report and are listed in the staff report, including the tandem parking, landscaping, outdoor lighting, and additional items like that. And then again, the proposed conditions that I just went through.
Thank you, Emily. Jessica, do you have any questions for staff?
Thank you. Yeah, do you just have a question? If you could review the tandem parking, I swear I'm looking at, let me give you a sheet. One of these civil plans, maybe sheet 3. And it looks like it's like the parking blocks the other space? That,
The space to adjacent to it
yeah,
or,
like it would block in that building. I mean, it would be the same unit, but. Right? But like if somebody's parked in,
they show the two tandem spaces. Or, so each driveway has that tandem space, but they can reverse out of there.
It
Through
it
the
does block
driveway.
themselves.
okay, they block themselves. I was making sure I wasn't looking at that wrong.
Oh, within the same unit.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
correct. That is the definition of the tandem parking is that it's two stacked parking spaces.
Well, it blocks all three of the spaces, like. Two other spaces, right? Generally tandem parking just blocks.
Oh,
the-
I
the space
suppose to
directly
get
behind
out.
it, but yeah. Okay, got it. I don't think I have any additional questions for staff. Thank you.
I didn't follow the clarification. What?
So it is this, they're showing the stacked tandem parking space, but if the planning commission finds that it does not meet the criteria, that it does not allow access out for all three parking spaces, then they can discuss that.
A clarification on that, since we're on that particular topic. So if the unit on the left, both cars are in and the car on the outside is tandemed. And the people on the right, far right car wants to get out.
The other unit, right?
Rub the other
Which
unit.
unit number are you looking at? 3?
Can't see the number. Yeah, 3.
Okay,
Just go top left, top right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking at
he's
bottom.
bottom right.
Yeah, I'm looking at bottom left, bottom right. So if the bottom left is full, it has all 3 spots taken. And the bottom right wants to get that right-hand car out of there. Is there room to actually do that?
The way it's drawn, I would say yes.
So you're saying if all garages are full
Right,
and there's 2 cars in tandem in one
No.
of the 2, in front of
It's
2.
tandem in front of left one, but
So no car
Right.
here, can this car get out? If there's 3 spots full and this guy's.
And no
trying-
car here, this guy can get out this way,
Yeah,
right?
that's what Robert's saying. Can he?
He
Yeah.
can get out if,
the left of the 2 cars can get out, but the right car, that seems like a really tight turn.
It's one of these issues we consistently run into, which is mathematically possible,
Yeah.
but realistically, different question.
it works on paper.
I mean, a traffic engineer will say that it does.
Yeah, and it works on paper, I guess we're not really discussing, but I'm just to clarify what we're looking at right here. I mean, so if you're in unit 3 and you have all your 3 cars parked in unit 3, I think unit 4 can get out.
Yeah.
But for unit 3, your third car would block in those 2 other, rather than just one, which is typically what you see in tandem parking, it blocks in the 2. Just to clarify.
Yeah, I don't
statement.
That's where I don't have a problem. I have a problem with that, with blocking that neighbor, which I think is gonna happen all the time if those are all taken up. But that's okay. We'll go on to other questions.
Ira, any questions for staff?
Did we talk about the alley paving? Is the,
Public Works has reviewed the plans and they are not requiring paving of the alley. The project to the west was not required to pave either axis as well.
okay. That's it.
Robert, any other questions?
I do. When we talked about the bulk plane encroachments that were taken away. And if I look at the south elevation and the north elevation as drawn on the original, looking straight at the garages, so there are bulk plane encroachments on both of those. Are those gone away? Not from this view, so the elevation looking straight at the garages. Are those bulk planes gone away?
So those are not gone, well, let me pull this up.
We've also lost your screen share.
Yep, I'm gonna pull this up.
Oh, you're full, Andy.
Third, So if you're looking at the south elevation. The north elevation, they did not go away completely, but they were reduced. I think that's what you're trying to pull up. is the redesign.
The south elevation right now.
I'd really like to see that because I'm really uncomfortable with what's in there. I don't think we need that bulk plane encroachments just so you can have a deck, so.
So it consists of,
All right, so you're talking about this,
No,
can you?
I'm talking about the one right here. How do I, no, the deck.
This one. Okay.
Right there.
So this encroachment, and now I can show you on the,
And there's one on the north elevation also. but, yeah.
correct. So that encroachment is. Oh.
Bill Gibson's here?
Yeah, yeah. That's this one on the left.
That one is right here.
Okay.
Yeah. So that is still there. The encroachments that were reduced were right along this parapet and this one down here.
So does that mean that the one on the, so that was
Right
the
here.
south elevation? So does that mean the north elevation one has gone away? Because there was one on the north elevation also. On the left-hand side of the north elevation. on
So the
roof.
ones that you see on the north elevation then are this chimney, this
It looks.
one as
can-
well.
Can you pull that north elevation? The,
Yes.
it's, because it's more than that from the looks of it on the drawings. You know, I'm uncomfortable with bulk planes
All
anyway.
right, so this
There,
is
this
from the
up on the
north.
top roof,
Yep, so that is included in the,
that's all gone away.
no, this is still here. So this that you're seeing right here, you can see from both sides. And that is in,
visible.
It's
from both the
visible,
north and
yeah.
south.
Oh, it's the
Chelsea.
same encroachment?
yeah. It's the gable in the middle of the elevation, right here.
I'll have more questions about that in a minute.
Okay.
And these are two separate buildings that have no gap between them.
Correct, so that was how the applicant described the buildings separate but adjoining in their narrative. So those are where I got that from. If Abby might have some more clarifying answers.
I don't even do that much space from what I could see, but I'd be curious, okay? Okay, I'm done.
Patrick, any questions for staff?
I do, so we have from what I can see, and when I was looking again yesterday, there's 2 documents available on the town website for this particular application. I don't see in here, and please show me if I'm missing it, but where is the materials palette? Because they're alluded to in text, they're shown in renderings in some version, but I want the official materials palette, because to me.
Physical,
it's a huge thing to talk about.
the physical sample is right here. Is it too heavy? We can.
Okay. We can just look at this and we'll get back to it.
Elena, questions for staff?
Yeah, ow, sorry. So what is on the north, I get north and south confused in Frisco, but I think it's, yeah, the north side where it's Teller, is that Teller Street, Teller Alley, Teller,
Teller
it's a
Street
Teller
Alley.
Street.
The alley,
It's the app.
the alley comes off the tower.
Aerial, I don't know if you have an aerial. It looks like, I don't know what goes on there.
It just stops into the mountainside.
Right.
It's like a dead end
But the street
right
is
away.
the other side. Teller Street,
So you have
this alley and then it goes into the hillside and then that alley. That's,
This says Teller Street. If you move the Zoom participants a little bit.
Gotcha, 1 second.
Yeah, see how that says Teller Street?
so that's the Teller Street
To the
that
right.
just dies.
It just dies. And it can, and so is,
That alley just continues.
so what, that parking area or whatever, is that town right away?
It is.
It is, but it's not a street. It's like something weird.
Google Maps, so I don't confuse myself. So to clarify, to the north of the development is like the dead end of Teller Street.
But Teller Street continues on the other
of the
side. There's
map.
just a
It just
hillside.
doesn't go through.
And so that area right there is basically used for parking,
It's not right away.
but people park, I mean, you see parked cars.
Yeah, parking is.
Okay, like if you access
But
this,
it's like, it's like anybody parking on town right away anywhere else, which they do all the time. But technically, I don't know why we're not asking that alley to be paved,
I
but
know, it seems like it should be paved, because I feel like this driveway goes into like a no man's land or something.
So this driveway would go into the dirt lot.
Yeah.
And it's a public works call. That was their decision and. To be honest, we don't have jurisdiction over whether.
Okay. Okay, it's just a little weird. And then,
It's not an alley there, it's the street. To the south is the alley.
right, okay. That's north is going up, right?
North is up, yeah.
Okay. Okay, and then, I was gonna, I was gonna ask Joe, the civil engineer, but, so this has no detention. It's all just infiltration into the ground?
So essentially what you see on the plans, not this plan, but Emily can pull
Oh,
up.
it's somewhere, yeah.
Yeah, he designs them with quote unquote infiltration areas, so basically dry wells at the four corners of the property. So-
Yeah. Okay. Cool. The other question I have is, can you talk about, I think you said something about, by the way, I just want to compliment you guys on, I love the PowerPoint presentations. I feel like it's much easier to follow when there's a PowerPoint presentation. But I was gonna ask about what you said about the ridge. You said something about if planning commission thinks that the ridge is okay, then. Yeah, so what's up to us?
Yeah, so let me pull that up.
Exception,
Are we making an exception? This is, needs an exception.
if we require.
So, right, if the planning commission finds that there is enough variation and breaks in the ridge line, and while there's not a physical break, there is this, can you see this, the gable here, adding visual relief. If you find that it meets the intent of the roof standards, then you can discuss whether or not you find that it meets the intent of the code.
Okay, but the staff recommends, or your recommendation is that it does.
I would say that would be something that the planning commission can discuss.
Okay. And then, you said something about there being a gray. When you look at the 3D renderings, it only looks like browns and tans to me. I don't see
Right,
gray.
and so with the material sample board, there is a gray toned with that the random width vertical siding.
Could you point to it?
So that's going to be this siding.
Ah, okay,
It's varied.
looks brown, but. Oh, okay, I see. All right, those are all my questions, I think. Thank you.
Andy, any questions for staff? Any additional questions?
I have one more question.
Yes.
Do we have the distance between the edge of the ridge line and the gable and the other direction also? I couldn't see it when I was looking at least the drawing I'm looking at.
So Robert, and I can try to get you a measurement real quick.
We repeat your question.
what's the distance from here to the gable and from here to the end?
So from like the north end to the center gable and then to the south end from that gable.
So the total distance is 103 feet. And I would have to,
So it's about 50-50.
right,
Quite. So. Footprint.
I have one more question as a
Yeah,
follow-up.
yeah.
This would normally probably be something that I would ask as staff questions at the end. But because it's pertaining to this particular set of illustrations, I kind of feel like I need to ask it now. This goes back to something that was discussed the last meeting where I was not present, but you know, I listened in for most of it. In terms of lightness and building materials. So there's been a project or two that have been executed that, at least to my recollection, were not approved to have such light things. I'll point to, I was just working granite or so with that extremely white grout that makes it look like a castle. And I was told by our fearless leader here, who's not present.
Oh, I was like, don't look at
Yeah.
me. Which one?
Yeah. I was told by the town that there was going to be some rectification measures for that. It shouldn't even get to that. Like, I feel like if we say no light materials, we have this vague statement in our code that speculates a range within a scale that nobody is really familiar with. Although it's highly technical, it's just most people don't use that.
Yeah.
So what are we gonna do to make sure that what we approve is what's delivered? And recourse should be remediation. At least that's my. Remediation means strip it out of your own cost. Or fix it, or do whatever it takes to bring it into alignment with what was discussed and agreed upon.
So, oh, now we're digressing, but.
I just want to pitch that out there because I want people to think about that. When we see a set of renderings that look a little overtly light, but before I jump too far ahead, I'm just gonna say the material palette on the board looks like absolutely good.
Right.
It's always the justification between pictures, materials, and then what gets thrown up in the field.
Yeah.
So I would say that, you know, if our opinion is this project is good to go, and in the future, we throw conditionals on it that say, according to the presented material palette, physical materials. So there's no, like, I don't care what the pictures look like. That's what counts, is the real thing.
Sure thing, and you can always post a condition that any material changes would be required to come back to the planning commission. As staff, we have a provision in the code, because it's a minor change, to your materials, and still meet our material standards, staff can approve it. So if that is something you want to change in the code, we can, like in the context of this application, you can condition that. But I don't want to get too in the weeds about other projects. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to be mindful of that.
Yeah. You brought that up, I was gonna bring almost. So I fully agree with you.
Any other questions? So my only question, which is more of just a statement for all of us, that there were some plans submitted versus June 13th to June 19th. You know, some transformers moved, correct, and some landscaping, so just keep that in mind throughout the discussion. And I have no additional questions, so at this time, I will turn it over to you, Abby. Thank you for coming. Nice to have you back.
Hi, guys. Thank you for all your comments and good to see you guys again. Thank you, Emily, for the summary on all of that. Let me go through and clarify some of those questions that you guys had. It's from the last meeting. The comments that we got were the concern about stepping this building more, having more relief with the transition, even though we're not necessarily required to, we're in the edge of this higher density going into the lower density neighborhood. And so trying to take that into account, trying to set this building as much as possible to kind of match next door. So the conversations that came up were how to do that, to create some more relief. At the time, it was requested that we do utilize the bulk plan encroachments, and that's the only reason why, not the only reason, but that's why those are there. And I've tried to keep them as minimal as possible to make sure the duplication and the relief is there, true to the need of the code, what the code is saying. So I'll go further into clarifying those, but so what we did is we went, instead of 2 duplexes, we went into a 4-plex, and that gave us the ability to step back that first story, that those first 2 units, units 2 and unit 3. So it reads more like a 2-story building, and then steps up to a 3-story building next to the 3-story building behind it against so the pedestrian facing sides to the north and the south and the east are all stepped. So it reads 2-story, then up into a 3-story. And that's what that center gable is kind of for. I don't know, Emily, if you can pull up the elevations for me, if that's okay.
Yeah, give me a.
You also have co-host ability, Abby.
Oh, great. I can
Yeah.
pull them up too if that's helpful. Emily, what's easier? Do you have them?
Yeah, I can pull them up.
Okay.
Give me just one moment.
Okay, yeah. So if you could go to the yeah, that's perfect. So what you're reading here, you're seeing the 3-story behind it, but what our intent was to keep the north and the south into a 2-story and step back up to a 3-story, and then the front, the east side, it reads 2-story, then steps to the 3-story to match the building behind it. Like I had said, the gable in the center, the reason why I'm pushing for that bulk plan encroachment is that it's giving this building an anchoring effect, which then the visuals is that it steps down, going to the north and the south. The challenge with this one, and the comment from last time also, was the duplication. The challenge was when we were requested, we initially had tried to pull 1 unit off of 5th Avenue there, but was requested to take both sides, all 4 entrances off of both alleys. So the unit 3 that has the bulk plan encroachment on the deck, that is there to take away the duplication process of unit 2 over here with the chimney. It has that shed roof, and I can add that to the other side and remove that bulk plan encroachment. But what it's doing right now and why it's there is to not duplicate one side versus the other. I'm really trying to, with our limited approach, trying to get rid of that duplication. But I'm scared if I add that shed roof and take that bulk plan encroachment away, that it's going to read more of a duplicate. So that's why that one is there. That's why the center gable is there. And then through our process, we brought down the bulk plan encroachments on the 2 parapets in the front, just to clean it up through structural development. But it also helped with eliminating that bulk plan encroachment in the front and those 2 parapets. So that's why that was there. To go to the questions, the tandem parking, they do not block each units. So if one unit is fully packed, the other unit can get out. It's wide enough. The driveway entrance is wide enough for 2 lanes there to get out. So it's not blocking another unit, just to clarify that. The encroachment on the deck, unit 3, I covered that. The ridge line, That can easily be broken up if I need to, but I was hoping with all the different ridge lines going on there, the shed roofs going in a different direction, the gable, that would give us enough variation there. And then the materials, yeah, I'm glad you have the board. Those are the materials we're using. Those are the ones that are spec'd. Those are the ones that are approved. The renderings just come out, however they can match. So we are speccing what is on that material board in front of you guys. So I think that covers it all, but let me know if you have any other questions.
Great, thank you, Abby.
Yeah.
Andy, any questions for Abby?
No.
Lena?
Abby, and so I really was gonna ask this question, even if Patrick hadn't brought it up, but the rock that is being used on this building, is that the same as the one on Fourth and Granite?
Oh, I don't know. I could check. I could double check. Do you,
It's just, I don't like the way it looks on Fourth and Granite.
Show
Okay.
you that question by, which I was gonna ask next, so we'll just do it
Okay.
together. How about that?
Okay, sure.
So she said in the drawing specs, it's dry stack, and that's what it says on the board. So if it's dry stack, we're not gonna see all those funny white lines, you know, all the
Oh.
white grout lines. So is dry stack what you're gonna stick to?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so that helps a lot.
Okay. That was my only question.
Ira?
Abby, thanks for coming. Just technical on language, that master bedroom language is disappearing. Is that something you want to change to primary bedroom?
Oh.
I'm just trying to protect everybody, you know.
I can't. Thank you for being conscious of that.
Thank you for being conscious. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
Jessica?
Is that a real chimney or an architectural chimney?
No, real chimney. Yeah.
Thank you. I don't.
Yeah.
Any additional questions?
It looks like on the lower elevation, we're showing solar panels. Just, can you speak to the timeliness of that?
Ooh, I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question?
Sorry, it looks like on the lower elevation, we're seeing solar panels. Could you just speak to the timeliness of those installed?
There's no solar panels on this project.
I think that's framing that's showing.
Is that what's going on?
Where are
On
you?
our screen.
Birdhouse, bridge vent.
Where, is it the hatch
The east elevation,
east elevation?
I think the ridge is showing framing, not solar panels.
It's a board and batten. It's
it's
the topmost vertical siding.
Okay,
That's a board and batten siding.
Any
On
volume
the
to
roof?
that?
Right there. It's a parapet. It's what's housing the
oh,
roof.
I got it. All right, I'm sorry.
Yeah. No worries.
Robert?
You said that was a real chimney. What's the real chimney for? A real fire, for a fireplace, a wood fireplace?
No, a gas one, but it will be vented out top.
Are there chimneys on all 4 units?
To get away from the duplication,
Okay,
the one on the left will be direct vented, so that will be directed straight out. And then the same on the back one has a chimney, one has a direct vent to eliminate that duplication. Yeah, so there's a chimney on the right,
okay.
Yeah.
and then
Okay.
there's direct vent on
I
the
see
left.
what you're doing. I see what you're doing. Okay.
Yep.
Patrick, did you have a follow-up for your question or?
Maybe just a second. So we were just trying to exactly figure out what we thought were solar panels. So is it an upper roof deck?
It's a roof deck on the back 2 units. So there's no roof. The roof deck on the front 2 are off of that 3rd level. The vertical board and batten that you're seeing on this west elevation and east elevation, that is the parapet wall for the roof deck on the back 2 units 1 and 4.
That have,
You see right there. Yeah.
is that a heated deck or is that internal drainage or is it just build up in the winter? How does that go?
So we have roof storage. We have heat tape in the gutters and the downspouts. We are talking about running the heat tape through the the deck as well to possibly get some snow melt in there.
That'd be a good.
Yeah.
We would love to see that.
I know you guys say it all every single time. And I truly, we are trying so hard to figure that out. And I think we're getting that figured out.
Any additional questions? Questions? I don't have additional questions, Abby. So at this time, I'm going to open up the floor to public comment for any comment on this agenda item only. If you wish to make a public comment, please either come to the podium or raise your hand online, state your name, address, and please keep your comments to 3 minutes. Come on up, sir.
My name is Stephen Henry.
Hi, Stephen.
Call me Hank. I live across the alley to the south on Frisco Street. So the alley that comes down the south elevation is our access to our garage.
Okay, can you state your address too for the record?
417 Frisco Street.
Thank you.
Sure. This bulk of my comment surrounds what we witnessed happen at 414 Teller, the 2 duplexes, and the wake of their structure. My biggest concern is snow storage. We see both the town and the people that the plow contractor for 414 push the snow into an empty lot to the west of 414.
Okay,
So my concern is, where's the snow going to go? I know on the north side, they have a big town right of way that will get utilized, certainly, I would imagine, for overflow parking as well. And that's another concern, was parking and snow removal were my 2 biggest concerns, because we see those at 414 get abused and some liberties taken on the empty lot that's to the west. So that's the crux of my concern.
I appreciate your comment, Hank. Thank you very much.
I do have one other thing. There was one interruption that we weren't told about when they had, I think, dig a water line down the alley when they constructed 414 Teller. We were never notified that the alley was going to be basically inaccessible. And we happened to be out of town at the time, but my father-in-law came over and he was like, he couldn't get to the alley. So he went around to the front of the house, but wasn't a big deal, but just heads up, that's closer to the corner. So maybe the distal people that use the alley for access won't have the same potential of interruption, but that's my 2 cents.
Thank you very much. And certainly we have taken note of that. Is there additional public comment at this time?
Could I ask a follow-up question?
There's a hand up.
Sure. Is it?
Hello. Hi, I'm Sherry Steves. I'm at 421 Frisco Street, which is directly south of the project. Abby, I appreciate some of the efforts that you've made to have the building fit in more to a neighborhood atmosphere. It still feels like that east side is wicked imposing. It's just massive the way that they now are, one big unit, even with some visual relief. It certainly will change how the neighborhood feel is, I think, for people in this area. The second thing that I wanted to address is snow storage. As Hank mentioned, snow storage is a huge problem. Town of Frisco's been over to my property numerous times when they've broken our fence, had to pile snow. And I'm concerned about how the Public Works is going to address snow removal for this project. And then finally, I agree about the parking, the tandem parking. I've seen in the unit that's just to the west of this project, parking, when people come, they take liberties, to park along the alley. And so that's something I think should be addressed. And finally, I'm not sure where all these construction vehicles are planning on parking. when they are working on this project. But it is certainly a concern so far as access. Several people who live on Frisco Street park behind their homes. That's where their garages are. And for people to get in and out of there. So that's something that I would appreciate hearing more about.
Thank you, Sherry. I appreciate your comments. Are there additional public comments at this time?
Seeing none.
We're seeing none, so we will close the public comment portion of this agenda item and move on to commissioner comments, but Lena would like to ask one more question.
I was gonna ask, we didn't talk about snow storage, and I wonder, Emily, if you want to go over that a little bit, so.
Right, so they are meeting the required snow storage areas. I can pull up the plan and point those out to you. For on-site snow storage. All right, so they are required to have 380 square feet of snow storage, and they are showing 400 square feet. They have this spot in this corner, A, B, and then C is this larger spot. They originally had it mirrored across the driveway. However, the transformer location was moved, and therefore the snow storage got moved to that site as well.
Okay. And so basically, the storage of the snow is for the driveways.
Correct. It's for the on-site uncovered paved areas.
Thank you.
Great. Jessica, why don't we start with you on your comments, thoughts? Everyone, please keep in mind.
Can I ask a staff question?
Yes.
Our dumpsters are not required for 4 units, it's 5 units.
Correct.
When we did, and I think it was Abby's project, when we did 116 Galena.
Mhm.
Didn't we require on 116 that they have to have in-garage trash pickup? We did that on one project. We're required that the HOA docs would require in-garage pickup so that there wouldn't be trash cans just sitting out forever and a day.
We do have code provisions about when trash cans are allowed to be outside the garages.
Doing this on one project where we actually required, and it may not have been Abby's project.
I don't remember. I mean, I know Waste Management does offer that concierge service.
Right.
But
And maybe it was a 4-bedroom that we did this on. I can't remember. So I just remember doing it once because we weren't happy with the fact that there's a chance that you could have a bunch of trash cans out.
Was it that one over like on Miners Creek where they were adding to the units? And
Yeah, maybe.
It was pretty near to a certain where they're gonna be on the site, so they were required.
It may have been.
Yeah, I don't
Anyway,
recall.
okay.
All
That was
right.
on a question.
We'll move to comments, and everybody, please keep in mind, if the tandem parking and the bulk standards are acceptable items to your comments and feedback.
Would you mind putting up maybe some of those standards? Whichever one you want first. So I don't have the bulk plane encroachments. I think it's still something I'm personally still wrapping my head around. I will say, like, I might have been sold on the argument for that main gable structure. There are some like unit 3 bulk plane encroachments that I don't think provide a substantial architectural feature, but again, I'm still wrapping my head around what that is. Those are shown if anybody wants to look, page A6. It's really just, corners for, the home, and I don't think it provides really anything substantial. If it was pushed back, you would get that same view from the facade. With the gable, you wouldn't get the same view, so I could buy that. I have a harder time buying those other ones that are shown there. But, you know, I could be convinced again, like I said, it's something that my brain's still, getting used to are these standards. So those are kind of my comments on that. And then the parking, I don't have philosophically a huge problem with this. Parking, without a doubt, will be on Frisco's right of way in that lot. At some point, the town of Frisco might decide to enforce their own parking regulations. Until then, it fits on this site. Is it functional? I don't think it's incredibly functional. But is 3 cars necessary as a standard? Again, those are other questions. I can get behind it. I don't find it to be incredibly functional the way it's shown. But I do think the architectural features are done nicely. I do like the colors. I do like the articulations that you showed. So I do think there's, it's a large building on the site. I do think overall it very likely meets the code. I could go either way on some of those plane encroachments and the tandem parking findings.
Thank you, Jessica. Ira?
And the overall, Abby, I like the design. I think it's big, it's massive, but it's also, it passes the criteria, which so many of our new projects do. And it's kind of like the current wave of non-diversity, diversity. So I don't know if that's clear, but I think we have a look that we're heading into, and it's looking a little bit repetitive, but in the overall, I like the design. I think you've addressed many of the concerns we had. The parking remains a mathematical can do. I believe it's a physical can't do. And then with the snow storage, I heard, comments from the residents. Hopefully there's a certain limit where the HOA would reach out and have snow carted off. Once they exhaust their ability to store snow,
Yeah.
that they have to go pay to have it carted away. And otherwise, and as Patrick brought up, the rendering comes out a certain color. The board physically is much nicer, and hopefully the board is what happens.
Yep.
Thank you, and that's it.
Robert?
Well, first off, Abby, since I'm the one who really pushed about stepping down, you did a nice job of that on the south side, and I'm really appreciative of that. I think you did as much as you could probably do, given what your clients want from this piece of property. I think where it's sort of like I could have it in one place, but I couldn't have it in the other. So the east side does look big. But it sort of has to accomplish what you accomplished on the south end by merging these two buildings, really, in essence. And I'm really appreciative of that. And Susan, this is more a comment for you and staff. I understand we have no jurisdiction over Public Works. I think it is a mistake for Public Works not to pave the Teller Street and the Teller Street alley, if for no other reason than snow storage issues. That it creates all kinds of issues for snow storage, and I wish that, at least from my perspective, I wish that comment would get back to Public Works, and that this commission would encourage Public Works to rethink that decision. Because I think it's going to create a nightmare for both the north side and the south side, trying to figure out what's street, what's not street, where people park, where snow can go, all of those things. So anyway, that's my personal comment, and I hope that others might support that and encourage them. I'm assuming Campbell Construction is doing your construction again. If it is, the comment I would make to the gentleman that spoke is that, having watched a construction project straight across the street from me by Campbell, they are about as good as I've ever seen about keeping their mess to a minimum.
Yeah.
So I hope that you have the same experience. And I don't really like the ridge line. I wish there was a way that you could break that up some more. But I'm not going to make it a condition of anything. I do want to make a condition that the board is what actually goes on this property.
Mm-hmm.
So otherwise, I'm done.
Are you good with tandem and bulk plane?
You know,
Had to be so direct.
Didn't want to ease in, you know?
I'm not happy about the tandem, but I think some of that is our code and what we're requiring, and I think it's not a workable solution. And if both units fill up with 6 cars each, I think it's going to be a nightmare. But that it fits within code, and so it's legal. I'm uncomfortable with the bulk plane still from the south elevation, but I think that I have to live with it because it's what you gave me in order to get what I wanted. So so I will be okay with the bulk plane encroachments today. And you won't hear me say that often.
Right.
Thank you.
Patrick?
Thank you. Well, first off, I mean, I've gotten to know some of the projects that Abby's put out there over the last couple of years, and they're all really strong. I would say that based on previous commissioner comments and et cetera, the adjustments to this set of documents is outstanding. There is, I mean, and it's the thing that we have all to bear, but we can't change zoning in this room. That's a different conversation. So this fits well within those guidelines. To that end, even the bulk plane encroachments here, I'm okay with, because the design team worked hard to adjust to the spirit of the rest of the guidelines, instead of just designing something that adhered to every single diagonal on a bulk plane analysis. We've seen some of those recently. It's been unfortunate, but I feel like this is trying to work within the guidelines, but also provide the best return. I understand that, these are all business opportunities, makes sense. I'm going to second Robert, and we'll get to that later, but we just want to make sure that the reality of the materials presented on the board is what happens. I really want to be stringent about that. Aside from that, the bulk plane's okay for me, and the tandem parking, it's the math that we have to live with. And on top of that, our code says you can't make driveways wider than XYZ. And it kind of comes down to, that's the best we can do. Drive smaller cars, people.
Thank you.
Ride bikes.
Lena?
Could you put up the 3D rendering, please? So Abby, I don't think I was here for the sketch plan discussion, because I don't remember this. But so, with that, I feel like we see a lot of just lots with a single family home becoming fourplexes, and that's not your fault. And I understand that that's the zoning. It's just, it happens so often that it feels like that's all we see. But
Yeah.
In terms of the tandem parking, yeah, it works on paper, and that's all you really need to prove. I don't have an issue with the bulk plane encroachments on this one, because from what I hear, you've done a lot to minimize those. So I appreciate that. I want to just, what is shown on this rendering is really light materials that I don't see here. So back to the materials, I really don't like the way that rock looks on 4th and Granite. I think it looks terrible. And I think the darker tone of the materials will look better than super light materials. So I just really want to stick to the palette the same way that everybody has stated. And Robert, I'm not sure how much pull we have with Public Works, but I do agree about paving the alley. That would probably be a better solution than just a free for all. The street, actually,
Well,
the street,
street on
the
the
street.
north side and the alley on the south side.
Yeah, and I feel like the street where it's kind of a free for all over there, like, should be addressed. So those are my comments, but otherwise, good job. Thank you.
Yeah, first, Abby, just want to thank you for the work that you've put into this project. I think it has come in a nice direction from the last time we saw it. The bulk plane being reduced, even just from what we have in our packet, I really appreciate. I do feel like those bulk plane encroachments, I try and picture a project without them. And would do those encroachments give me substantial relief from what it would look like without them? I think the answer is yes on this one. I do think that they're helpful and they break up the mass. Abby, one thing I would say is, the rendering that we were looking at from above that kind of shows us the bulk plane. I don't know if we can see that one again, but I worry that it obscures kind of some of the things that we would like to see. I think some of the discussions around ridgeline could have been cleared up if we could have seen the ridgeline from somewhere, but we don't really ever, we don't ever see the ridgeline.
I have
anywhere.
renderings if you want to see them. I have without the bulk plane.
Well, I think that would be helpful, honestly, because I think that when I try and look at the roof plan and I'm trying to just figure out where is the ridge that we're talking about.
Sure.
A lot of what I think we're seeing is railing and not necessarily a super long ridge. So I think that would have helped your case a little bit. And I'm curious to see those. As far as the tandem parking, snow storage, I think I agree with the fellow commissioners. Those are things that on paper, this meets code, and that's all we're here to enforce. If we want to address our code in our joint work session coming up, we can certainly have that discussion. But for right now, I think this works. I would also echo the material comments. I think as long as we stick with the dry stack stone and materials on the board, it's going to look a lot better than what's in the renderings. But overall, I think you've done a nice job. I think you got rid of a lot of the duplication that we were concerned with in the last viewing. And yeah, I think if you have some renderings to show us of the roof and kind of see what's going on up there, yeah, let's take a quick look at those. I would just like to see those.
Emily, do you have that stack of renderings I sent, or do you want me to pull those up?
Can you pull those up? I don't have those on this computer.
I'll share my screen. Okay, so each one of these, can everybody see my screen now?
Yeah, we're
Yes.
seeing
Okay.
the bulk plane still.
So each one of these will have a bulk plane and then without a bulk plane. So there's without the bulk plane.
What do you have from up above? I want to see the roof.
Let's see if we can see it from here. You can see a little ridge line here. That's the ridge line that we're talking about right here.
But that's a railing, right? Or is it a ridge?
It's right now, it's a solid wall. It's the party wall coming up. But from the street view, you can see, and this is across the street view.
Yeah.
It's broken up, just from perspective there. Let's see if we can.
Does that wall really just stop on?
No, it's
Pen,
the,
or is
I
it-
know, it's the renderer.
I'm
like-
trying not to pick on you.
I know, it's not me. The guy, he didn't return it, but yeah, that wall is returned back there. Yep, that's from the other view. This is the parapet wall that you're seeing up there. The rest is hidden. So this is the intent, is to make it view more of the 2-story. You can see it a little bit there. And then you can't see
You
it.
don't have a top view down.
Let me see, I have some old ones. Let's see. Yeah, so there you go. That wall should return right there.
I don't think I'm
And-
seeing what you're seeing right now, Abby.
Oh, you can't see this. Okay. There you go. Okay. Does that help?
Oh, look at that.
There you go. It's an older version. This hasn't been drafted yet. This wall should be returned, but it's just a parapet wall for the railing and privacy.
Because of the height that you need for safety?
No,
Decorative.
Nope, it's to get the 3-foot railing height for the roof deck. Yeah,
You're trying to get to 42 inches.
So people don't climb on the roof. on the roof
Correct.
And wander around.
have a party on the roof, have a party on the neighbor's roof.
Yeah, that's great rendering. That helps explain kind of what was going on up there.
Sure, yeah.
It was tough to see really where this long ridge, so technically, as far as the long ridge, we don't really have a long ridge. We have a long parapet wall.
Correct, yeah.
And
Yeah.
how long is the parapet wall, do you think?
I think Emily just measured it and it was like around 100 feet
50 feet
total.
On either side of the.
And it's so like 50-ish feet on both sides.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you. I don't have any other
Absolutely.
comments.
So you have two roof.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
So
I'll
you
get
have
back
you have two rooftop decks in the back, and then the front side has them kind of a step lower, right?
Correct. It's a whole,
Okay.
it's
I'm
a
fine.
whole
You don't-
level down.
Yeah, that's what I thought I saw, but I wanted to make sure.
Yeah,
It
Yeah.
was nice seeing that drawing. That would have been helpful
Yeah.
earlier.
absolutely.
Any additional comments? All right, so my comments are, I mean, to reiterate what Hank said, I mean, snow happens here and I think we need to be holding people accountable for removing their snow when they don't meet their, or they've maxed out their snow storage. I absolutely think we need to add rooftop decks and decks into calculations in our code. Because people don't heat them, they just throw it over the side and not into their snow storage area. So a lot of the public comment was certainly things that need to be changed in our code, and fortunately or unfortunately, they are meeting their snow storage, but that's future down the way. Abby, thank you. I always appreciate that you come here, you listen, you care about building good things, and you know, we're all a little sore on the 4th and Granite, so we do want to see that materials board be applicable when constructed.
Absolutely.
I'm fine with the bulk plane standards. I think they do provide architectural relief. The tandem parking, I'd like to reiterate what Jessica said. If the town of Frisco starts enforcing parking and slapping a $75 ticket like they do on Main Street, you know, they probably won't be parking in the right of way that often anymore. So it is a little bit on the town to start enforcing their parking problems.
That's right.
I was just gonna say,
You can call the police department too if you see. the
For parking and
Parking.
Additional thing about parking, and it's kind of bizarre, in the front of our house in Frisco Street, there's a town right away and room enough to pull in a vehicle, you know. We have visitors come park, you know, people, friends stay overnight, that's where they park out front. Our garage is in the back of the house. There was actually a time, and we live next door to the mayor. There was a point, he had his boat trailer out front. And I had a plow truck parked out front. And they were both there overnight, and they actually both of us got a warning about, you know, parking overnight. I'm like, that was the one time in 20 years. You know?
I mean,
And
and
certainly we've had vehicles out there numerous.
yeah,
you know.
and most people who are breaking the parking laws are people that live here and are habitually park on Main Street or whatever in the right of ways. Certainly at town events, but you know, we can only request so much of the code, and I think that it comes down to a little bit of enforcement, you know, problems with snow storage and parking. Overall, though, on this building, you know, like Sherry said, the east side is very long, but I think there's you know, buildings in the neighborhood that are the same length, then that is more of a you know, drive by versus stare at for the neighbors next to it. So overall, I think you've done a great job, Abby, and I have no further comments. Any additional comments?
Just thank you, Abby.
Anybody want to entertain a motion?
Sure.
And do we need to read the conditions or just state 1 through 8 and then add in?
you can can say with the staff recommended conditions, you don't need to read them all, but you would want to, if you want to add any conditions, you would need to add those.
To add a condition,
Yeah.
Robert,
Yeah,
about the material.
that it
Yeah.
has to follow the material board. You got it right.
Okay. With respect to file number MAJ 22-0002, I move that the recommended findings set forth in the July 21st, 2022 staff report be made and that the recommended conditions set forth therein be taken with the addition of a ninth condition that the materials,
As presented.
the materials be as presented on the material board. And I don't know if this is an additional condition, but if there are major changes to the material so that they don't look substantially like this one, that they could come back to the planning commission. Well, major, well, I would say any, okay, any changes. Okay. Yeah, that it come back to the planning commission. And the planning commission hereby approves the request for the major site plan application for the proposed new multifamily townhome project located at 307 South Fifth Avenue, lot 123, block 26, Frisco Town Sub.
Cheryl, will you please call vote?
Commissioner Franken,
Yes,
Commissioner Gleason, Commissioner Lesmes,
Yes.
Commissioner Potter,
Yes.
Commissioner Stabile,
Yes.
Commissioner Tain,
Yes.
Commissioner Withrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Abby. We wish you guys best of luck and hopefully you're good neighbors doing good construction and staying within your snow storage and parking requirements.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you all as always. I appreciate it. Have a good one.
thank you.
So one day I'll get this right and I forgot to approve the minutes. The swearing in threw me off, guys.
I moved the minutes.
Cheryl, want to call vote? Or do we just say aye? All in favor, say aye.
I,
Let's take a 5-minute break and then we'll move on to the next 2 agenda items. If that's.
yeah.
I know one's or we can do,
let's dispense of the one.
yeah, let's get
Let's take number 2.
2 and then, so we'll move on to agenda item number 2. Planning file number MAJ 21-007. A major site plan application for a new mixed-use development, CU 21-002, a conditional use application to allow ground floor residential in a mixed-use zone district, CU 21-0003, a conditional use application to allow for less than 20% mix of uses in the mixed use zone district, and SD 22-004 and MPA 22-001, a minor subdivision application and minor PUD modification to relocate utility and open space easements. Property address 80 West Main Street, Commercial Lot 1, second filing of Royal Mountain Ranch PUD. Applicant Ken Marsh, White Pine Residence LLC, represented by Alan Guerrera Architects. And for the record, from the applicant, Suzanne Allen Sabo, states, we have determined with the development team of this project that we will need to ask for a continuance of planning file number MAJ 21-007, CU 21-002, CU 21-003, MPA 22-001, and SD 22-004. We need to make a few modifications and corrections with staff prior to major site plan final planning commission meeting. We respectfully ask that this project be continued to August 4th, 2022 Town of Frisco Planning Commission meeting. Can I get a motion?
Move it be tabled to August 4th.
Second.
All in favor?
I,
Aye. All right, we will take a 5-minute recess.
I won't be there for that meeting.
What? You already took your recess?
No, okay.
Oh. I gotta get a recess.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Hank.
And I will miss it.
I worked with Cameron. I was like, wait, it's.
I've been called worse.
All right. We will move on now to agenda item number 3, planning file number MAJ 22 001. A final review of the major site plan application for adding 29 condominium hotel units to the triangular parcel of the infill site more commonly known as the Alpine Inn in the Gateway Zone District located at 105 Lusher Court, Lot 1, Block A, Discovery Interchange West Sub. Applicant Alpine Inn LLC, represented by Base Camp Residences. And Susan. Oh, Emily's gonna do it. Yeah, I forgot.
All right. So this next agenda item is the project submitted by Base Camp Residences LLC, known as Base Camp Studios. The applicant is proposing a new 29-unit condominium hotel development at 105 Lusher Court. The project involves 2 buildings with 3 stories above grade, 13,600 square feet of dwelling unit floor area, 350 square feet of office space, and covered and surface parking. The north building has 21 units and the south building has 8 units. The existing site contains the Alpine Inn, and the proposed condominium hotel would be in addition to what is already on site. There are no proposed changes to the Alpine Inn. So to provide some background on the project, the application was first submitted and reviewed as a sketch plan by the Planning Commission at their March 3rd, 2022 meeting as a multifamily residential development, which in the Gateway Zone District requires a conditional use permit. Based on feedback, the application was resubmitted as a condominium hotel project, which is a permitted use in the Gateway Zone District. The Planning Commission reviewed the revised sketch application or sketch plan application on April 21st. At that time, commissioners were in agreement that they do not believe that this use meets the definition. They felt that this is a 100% residential project, therefore a conditional use permit is required. They did not believe that this will operate as a condominium hotel with a centralized management structure as is required by the code. They also found that it does not meet the community plan goals or offer any community benefit. So that's some background. Moving forward, the application is in general conformance with the Gateway District zoning requirements in relation to density, lot coverage, setbacks, and building height. For the purposes of determining density, the individual condominium hotel units count as residential units. There are 29 proposed units where up to 39 units are allowed on site. And then moving on to use standards. During the April Planning Commission meeting, commissioners had a number of questions and comments as to whether the application meets the definition of a condominium hotel. The Frisco UDC defines a condominium hotel as a multi-unit structure consisting of dwelling units, hotel or motel units, or some combination thereof, and which units may be individually owned and which provides a centralized management structure. The plans identify a unit on the ground floor of the north building, which is labeled as an office for centralized management. If this application is to proceed as a condominium hotel, staff recommends a condition that the applicant shall be required to enter into a covenant that governs the use of the property consistent with that of a condominium hotel, including financing rules, operation, and management structure. Moving on to development standards, looking at the non-vehicular access for the project, it includes sidewalks adjacent to the internal access drives. A new sidewalk is proposed to be installed along the northerly edge of Lusher Court, along the entire length of the property frontage to the edge of Summit Suites driveway access. The Summit Suites has a remodel application in right now, and their access drive is being relocated to align with Meadow Drive as part of that remodel application. Staff recommends that a condition be added to this application that the sidewalk termination and crosswalk location be extended to the western edge of the Meadow Drive intersection with Lusher Court. The application meets the remaining development standards in relation to landscaping, vehicle and bicycle parking, snow storage areas, and outdoor lighting. Moving on to facade standards. The north and south facades of the 21 unit building each have a street facing facade. The north facade faces I-70 and the south facade faces Lusher Court. The south facade of the 8 unit building also faces Lusher Court. Per non-residential development standards, each street facing facade shall include one or more deep eave or overhang of at least 24 inches in depth. The application does not meet this standard. Additionally, any building wall over 27 feet shall change geometric planes by at least 2 feet in depth for a minimum of 6 feet in width, and then any building wall exceeding 54 feet in total building facade length shall change geometric planes by at least 4 feet in depth for a minimum length of 6 feet. Both buildings do not meet this standard. The proposed buildings have a combination of pitched roofs alternating between the front facing gables at a 10-12 pitch and ridge lines with 4-12 pitches. Architectural elements have been added in the form of false chimneys to create a visual break in the ridge line. If the planning commission finds that the architectural elements along the ridge line meets the intent of the code, then the application meets the standard. And then I've included, so these are the elevations that were shown on April 21st. And these are the current elevations. So as you can see, there has not been any significant changes made to comply with the facade standards. And then here's the south building with 8 units as well from April 21st. And then the current elevations. The proposed building materials include horizontal lap siding and trim and shades of gray, vertical siding in brown with black metal railings and windows. The proposed materials and colors meet the code standards. As far as design variety, the project provides some architectural relief from the duplication of units on the property through utilizing a variety of windows, decks, balconies, and roof pitches. However, in reviewing the elevation drawings for each building, there is some repetition of various features across units. If the planning commission finds that there is adequate architectural variation to limit duplication of units, the application then meets the standard. And in conclusion, staff finds that the proposed development application is not in compliance with several requirements of the Frisco Unified Development Code, specifically facade standards, including building elements and building articulation and amenities.
Great, thank you so much, Emily. Andy, any questions for staff?
I guess I'm just curious how it got on the agenda with so many things that don't meet the standards. We don't see projects.
Typically, we discuss this with an applicant prior to their public hearing. In this case, the applicant chose to continue forward with the public hearing. So you have choices in your action tonight. You have approval conditions, denial.
Another question for staff, can we short circuit this, or do we need to see the entire process there?
Public hearing, which would include allowing the applicant the opportunity to speak as well as speaking.
Lena, questions for staff?
So you talked about a restrictive covenant for the use, and then there's the restrictive covenant for the workforce housing. So there's 2, or is it one and the same?
So there's the restrictive covenant that they're proposing doesn't follow the town standards, so that's not something we would regulate or recognize.
So I thought, okay. So the restrictive covenant that was in the packet was put together by the applicant.
Yes, that was proposed by the applicant, so it doesn't meet our workforce housing deed restriction.
Oh,
They're not proposing any bonus density, so. Provide.
session. It was a good, sort of, right? Gonna offer it up because we wanted workforce housing proposed.
I'm not sure. It's just something they proposed on, so it'd be a good question for them, but then the condition about use was to better align with how safeguard in place to make sure that the proposed use was actually going to be the use in perpetuity.
Sure. Okay. I don't have any other questions.
Can you go back over the phrasing about,
Condotel.
yeah, our code for condotel?
Okay, we'll lean in. Please remember to
We'll
lean in.
Sorry.
Okay. So the Frisco condominium hotel definition is this that we have right here. Again, a multi-unit structure consisting of dwelling units, hotel or motel units. And then they can be individually owned but they provide a centralized management structure.
My point was that I did look at Colorado revised statutes, which define a hotel under 13.2.8, an establishment known to the public as a hotel which is primarily engaged in providing lodging and meals for the general public. So since our definition says it has to be a hotel or motel units, that would seem to me that would go back to Colorado statutes on what a hotel is.
So I think there's a difference between the hotel and the condominium hotel. I don't know if Susan wants to add on to that.
The part of our definition does include dwelling units.
Town motel or it's
Dwelling units,
consistent
hotel
dwelling
or
units,
motel
okay.
or
okay,
some combination.
okay.
But also, I think, doesn't the town code have a hotel definition? Yeah, so that would probably supersede the state
Well,
statutes.
No, well, only if it's more restrictive. State statute always take precedent.
Oh,
Anyway,
We make our own rules.
Any additional questions?
I don't have any additional questions at this time.
Ira, questions for staff?
So this condo hotel, or does that require amenity for the units? Some kind of an amenities?
Sorry, for this development, there was a community space requirement, but that has to do with the size of the development, not the definition of it being a condo hotel.
Okay. And then I could be wrong. It's happened. In the narrative, in the site plan narrative on page 4 is a color rendering. It says aerial view looking northwest. Is that northeast?
Sorry, what page are you on?
4, it's a rendering, color rendering. Top says original proposal. The one below it says current proposal. I could be dizzy.
It's looking to the northeast. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's look at the northeast.
It's okay.
So it's mistitled?
So you're right.
Hold on, this could be a first.
There's a lot of attachments.
Correct, that is.
Yeah.
So I'm correct. That's wrong.
Yes.
I just wanted to be perfectly clear.
All right. Any other questions?
There is discussion, there is mention in there, and some of the paperwork I was reading is quite a bit. It talked about a 99-year land lease. What's on a land lease? What part of this project? Or was that superfluous language that I was reading?
Maybe adjust that, yeah.
Okay,
Jessica, any questions for staff?
No questions.
I also have no questions for staff. So at this time, we will turn it over to your team. And give us your presentation, please, Mr. O'Neill.
Good evening. My name's David O'Neill. You know, I have to tell you guys, I have done this a lot over 40 years. And it's the first time that I've had two commissioners indicate they're predisposed to reject what we're going to do before I've even opened my mouth. And so we're all here. So I'd ask the benefit of an open mind. We have spent a huge amount of time trying to figure out the code and how it applies to here. And so, we're really approaching this in good faith. And so we'd love that, reciprocated for what that's worth,
Absolutely.
all being among friends and direct here. So this really begins with a story, and it begins at the log cabin. And I called up, I got to know Michael Penny and Jocelyn Mills. I don't know does everybody know who they are? Michael was the town manager for a period of time. And then Jocelyn was probably the best planning director we've ever worked with. We did Peak One with her, and we did a Whole Foods project with her. And I asked them to get together for breakfast, and I didn't tell them what it was concerning. And so we got together and I said, okay, guys, this is about 2011. This needs to be absolutely confidential. They said, okay. And I said, I think I can get a Whole Foods to come to Frisco. And Michael about fell out of his chair. And he understands, they're the best retail tenant in America for any community, much less a small community like this. And he said, what do we need to do? Said the main thing is we've got to be confidential. Every community between Denver and Grand Junction would love to have Whole Foods. And God bless Michael and Jocelyn and the town council. We probably spent 8 months negotiating an executive session without a leak. It's unbelievable, that it's probably 10 people involved. Nobody had a shred. So that's where it got going. And then over the next 7 years, we got the deal done to purchase land, and we created a plan for the center. And our dream was to create a sense of place there. And when I talked to the institutional investors, I said, fantastic, Whole Foods, at the heart of Colorado ski country, but you have to make it a U-shaped facing I-70, in which case, they'd give me a check, and they'd give carried interest, and they'd do everything. They'd fill it full of their shit national tenants. And I said, well, there's two problems I have with that. The first is I want to orient the whole thing towards Peak One. We want to create a sense of enclosure here and a sense of place. And I want an eclectic mix. I want the national tenants to give it strength, but I want local tenants to give it character and life. And so we had that plan. And then we put a park running right down the middle of the parking lot there. And I don't know if you all can imagine what I'm talking about. Nobody in their right mind does that. And the institutional investors said, good luck, and they were out. So then we had to figure out how to get it financed. We figured that out through some creative ground leases. And then we started building buildings. The first building was the Whole Foods building. We learned so much working with Whole Foods Market over about 2.5 years about how to put a project together. And they were very helpful in the center. We were very helpful. We were involved in the interior design of that building. And then we did the inline building, which had the liquor store and the Epic Mountain Gear. And then we did the Rio building, which is now Outer Range Brewery. And then we did the wellness building. And then we did Pinnacle. And then we did the Base Camp Shops and Residences, which includes 18 deed restricted units, which people love that. But uniformly, we get positive feedback on that. We get positive feedback on all the buildings. People love the buildings, particularly Base Camp Shops and Residences. And I would just footnote that what we do deed restricted locals housing. Over 1,000 locals live in our neighborhoods, but this was kind of a one-off, that just kind of presented itself. So we said, great, we'll figure out how to do a shopping center. And I'd note the Urban Land Institute, recognized it with one of their, with a impact award, a nomination there. The tenants, we landed an eclectic mix of locals and nationals. And then meanwhile, next door, the transit center was there, and Thomas Davidson said, hey, can you help us with that? And we organized a charrette and brought in some really excellent people. Tom was kind of leading that, and did a schematic site plan for the charrette. And if you looked at the schematic site plan that came out of charrette and what's built there, it's exactly the same. So we were instrumental in that happening and pulling that together. And by virtue of that, all of a sudden, we're legitimately the world's highest transit-oriented development. And then you start looking at it and you go, what about the impact? We represent 20% of the retail, just under 20% of the retail sales tax collections of this community. That is a big deal. And we pulled it off, really being intelligent in terms of creating sense of place and architecture and creating a great community place. And I share all that with you because you may not agree with us, but we're passionate and we're committed and we do great work and we get it done. We're not coming in here, with a bait and switch and trying to do a fast condominium project. No, we have a grand vision. This is the last building, and we're approaching this with the same enthusiasm and passion as we have the others. We think this is the best yet, and I'll try to make the case for that tonight. So rather than going on about how compatible we are in architecture and blah, 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 and all the things that, staff pretty much goes along with us. I thought, let's get right into the heart of darkness, in the areas where there appears not to be agreement, and use is a good place to begin. In our narrative that you've seen, we had proposed that, so if you conclude it's a permitted use, and I'm a lawyer, I've talked to other lawyers, everybody seems to think, it's a permitted use. You can draw your own conclusions. As a permitted use, we're not obligated to do anything with respect to housing. However, in your packet, we said we're going to put what I'd call a kind of light deed restriction that would give locals a first right of refusal. Well, as we've reflected upon it, everything we've done, we like locals in there because it creates life. The lights are on, in a unit such as this, they would be the heart and soul of the HOA. So we're proposing to beef that up and take 27% of the units and make those for have to be locals, owned, occupied by locals, and no short-term rentals. So 27% of the project does that. The remaining 73% would have that deed restriction. So anything else we put on the market, locals would have first shot. I would love it if locals bought all the units. That would be fantastic. Right now, though, we've got interest rates are double what they were when we first started this process. Inflation is the highest in 40 years, and we're about to go into a recession. So the things we talked about several months ago, we need to understand what we're doing. This is what we can do, and we can get it financed. And we think this is kind of meeting, not kind of, it's a voluntary thing that we think is a huge contribution to the community. It will be a great contribution to that particular project. So, and I want to say just one other thing too. The other projects we've been involved in, we've done heavier deed restriction, are all heavily public subsidized. This is a private project, private property without a nickel of public subsidy. And I think that's important to keep that in mind. So other staff concerns, and let me go through the whole thing and we'll double back and drill down on questions if that's okay with you, Kelsey.
Yes, absolutely.
Articulation is fascinating. If you could listen to the debates we had in our office, we had raging debates debating exactly what the code meant here. And finally, yesterday it started to become clear to me in terms of what I think is going on here. And I want to see if you agree with me. But the first thing is, in the staff report, it talks about, let's see, this should be on. Yeah, on page 7. Yeah, it's paragraph, it's 186 point facade standards. There we go. And it first talks, this is page, let's see, 17, thank you. So the intent, and I think this is really important, the intent is to ensure that facade design and development is compatible with Frisco mountain town character in existing buildings. In our view, we clearly meet that intent. But when we get more specific and we drill down in paragraph 2, it says building elements. All building elevations shall employ varied articulation of wall surfaces. Each street-facing facade, which would be I-70 and Lusher, shall include one or more, and I underline one, or more deep eaves or overhangs at least 24 inches in depth. We have not one, we have 30 units that have deep eaves consisting of 7-foot deep porch. We have overhangs with shed roofs, porches with the 2-foot overhangs. And so everywhere there's a unit, the geometric plane has deep eaves and overhangs. That was, staff said that didn't meet the code. I respectfully disagree. I think it absolutely unambiguously meets the code because the code says include one deep eaves or overhang, and we include 30. So that's kind of where it begins. But now here's where it really gets interesting, at least to me. 3A, 3B, 3C, 3D on the succeeding pages all refer to standards that are kicked in when we talk about walls. And the staff report talks about wall segments. And so wall segment is not a defined term in the code. So we're going to assume, I assume what they meant was wall. Okay. So it raises the question, this may sound like a ridiculous question, but it's not. It goes to the heart of the matter. What is a wall? So Webster's, now I'm the one going outside of the code because there's no definition in the code. Webster's says, one of the sides of a room or a building connecting floor to ceiling or a foundation and a roof, or a material layer enclosing space on the wall of a container. So if you look at, if you put that rendering back up there, any of them will show, but I think you can all imagine it. You've got walls and then you have spaces. Okay, you have walls and you have spaces. And so in the first time a wall is referenced in here, there's a reference to a 123-foot wall along I-70. And so I respectfully submit to you, a wall is a continuous plane where it's a wall, like that's a wall. And then the wall is broken up with voids and spaces. Those are voids and spaces. Those are not walls. Now, what's really interesting, Ronnie, are you out there? Ronnie, are you out there?
Yep, I'm right here.
Okay, can you put up the slide that compares the base camp interpretation of walls versus the Centura Studios interpretation?
Give you co-host ability 1 second here, Ronnie.
Okay.
You should be able to share your screen now.
This is really interesting to me. Okay, so can you collapse Ronnie's picture just for a second here?
Oh, it's right here.
And Ronnie, you don't have the one with the arrows, I guess, but I can just do it. So on the left is the I-70 facade of base camp. And so you'll see that facade, there's flat areas that I would say are walls. And then there's voids and spaces between the walls, and they alternate. So you got wall, spaces, voids, wall, spaces, so on and so forth. On the right, and so as a result of that definition, the 123 feet triggers all sorts of articulation requirements, which we'll get into in a second here. On the right is the biggest building at Centura, which you all approved. Was it 6 months ago, a year ago? I can't remember. Time flies so quickly. And you have the same thing. It starts on the left. That's about 84 feet approximately. You've got a wall, you've got spaces, you've got a wall, you've got spaces, you've got a wall, you've got spaces. In both cases, you've got an eave that runs continuously. Maybe you have a roof element runs, but you have wall, spaces, voids, wall, spaces, voids, so on. In Centura, that was not a wall. And so we met the articulation standards there. At base camp, it is a wall, and we don't meet the standards. So I found that was really interesting. So tonight, I don't know how this works legally, but I'd love to have you make a finding that a wall is a wall. And if you say a wall is a wall, the articulation issues go away. Now, let me go back to one thing that I think is really important here. And then we'll come back to that. This building, if you step back, has significantly more articulation than any building in base camp. In fact, as I look around town, this building, as it is designed here, has significantly more articulation than any other building I've seen around Frisco. And Tom and I, as we're wrestling with this, he said, I've been an architect for 40 years. He said, I've never designed a building with so much articulation. He says, quote, all these corners, as we go from space to void, the stopping and started, that's what we call articulation. And not only do you have articulation in the building, you have articulation in light. So we start out from a common sense perspective, we've got a building with a ton of articulation. And so now we're just trying to figure out, why is the code saying we don't have articulation? And I would submit it's because of the wall segment. Now, so I just, the conclusion and say a wall is a wall. Definition in Webster and in terms of common sense, then all the issues, every single one of the issues regarding articulation go away with the exception of one, and we can get into that if you want, but I don't think it's necessary, because I'd suggest a condition of approval that just says applicant and staff work together on articulation consistent with the findings regarding definition of a wall in the code requirements. So we can do a close review and make sure we've got everything. So I'm going to suggest that as a condition. But I think what's really important to keep in mind, this building, if you just look at it by any standard, has a huge amount of articulation. We believe it meets the intent of the code. And what we're trying to do is meet what, in our view, are confusing technical aspects of the code, which go away if a wall becomes a wall. So the combination of a finding that a wall is a wall and the condition that staff work with the applicant to make sure it meets, the code requirements, I think the articulation issue is resolved. Let me keep rolling here. Let's keep it. And then I think, you okay? Oh, go ahead. I'll hear about it all night too. Okay.
I just wanted to say that, yeah, this building, pretty much every 14 feet, it has a 2-foot jog or less than 14 feet. And that creates a lot of corners. And I've circled all the corners. Every corner is an articulation. That's what articulation is. And every elevation has, every 14 feet has a 2-foot jog. And then in many cases, most cases, if you go 56 feet, because we have a 14-foot module, we did another articulation to make it 4 feet. So it met that standard. So I have just a really hard time understanding how this could be looked at as not having enough articulation.
But we, the code's important, but we step back and we look at it and go, what's the building look like? And Tom says, the building looks great. It feels great. The funny thing is this building, one could argue, is not compatible with the other buildings because it has so much more articulation than the other buildings at base camp, but won't go there. So let's talk about, so that's articulation, and we'll come back and answer your questions on that. And then another staff concern was community spaces. And so Ronnie, could you put up the drawing of the community spaces? And then could you walk us through what elements of the community? And basically, the building is not 25,000 square feet, but staff has concluded, since the Alpine Inn is next door, that triggers a higher standard of community spaces, notwithstanding we have Outer Range Brewery and all the other community space next door. But then on the property, we believe we meet the code. Ronnie, can you hear me?
I can. And hopefully you can see my screen. On the left is a page from staff's report. It's actually page 23 that references community spaces and the code criteria that David was just referring to, which is itemized as number 3 in the upper left-hand corner. On the right-hand side of the screen here, I'm showing you an exhibit from our submittal, which is the landscape plan, which I believe is the final page of the actual formal 24 by 36 document. That being said, a community space must be provided. A minimum of 3 community spaces shall be provided for any development with over 25,000 square feet of gross floor area. A community space may include, but is not limited to, public benches, water features, public kiosk, gazebo, public patio, seating areas, public plazas, and public art. I wonder if this was just not seen by staff, but on our landscape plan, we are showing that there are 3 benches, which we think of as perimeter benches, that form along the edge of a pedestrian path that's at the edge of the detention area. In addition to that, we have 2 more public seating areas that also have string lights over them that are more proximal to the buildings. So in our understanding, we've provided 5 of these types of amenities, and they meet the criteria under both public benches and patio seating areas.
Thank you, Ronnie. I wanted to get into one other staff concern, and that was the extended sidewalk. And staff had suggested, I can't remember which commissioner, Ira, it may have been you, somebody had suggested, I think it was you, had suggested extending the sidewalk all the way over to Meadow.
I know the conversation, but that wasn't me.
You, Robert.
Was that you? Okay. Was that you, Robert? Okay. But you know what, that's just one of those things that adds expense. So as we're trying to keep the cost down, but if that's something that Planning Commission wants, that's a condition we're happy to accept. Okay. And then we've got Next, let's see if I've hit all these things. I think I've hit it all. Next, I wanted just to chat about the conditions of approval and then I'll wrap it up. So we're suggesting that there's 5 conditions of approval. Basically, we're accepting all the conditions staff's suggesting, we're adding 2 to those. So the first one, staff has suggested that with respect to the use, the permitted use, that there be, this is on page 12, it says the applicant shall be required to either enter into a covenant that governs use of the property consistent with that of a condominium hotel, including financing rules, operation management structure. And we've given, I think it's probably attached to your packet. We gave staff a narrative on that. And so we can talk to you about it, but I think it's better we just make it a condition and we'll negotiate with staff on that. So that'd be the first condition. The second condition would be a new one. And that's that the units in the project be encumbered by a deed restriction, providing 2 things. First, 8 units, 27% of the project would be deed restricted to be owned and occupied by locals. And then, you know, some feedback on, does that mean Frisco or does that mean Summit County? And so there's some discussion that could be had on that. And then the second part of that is 21 units, the remaining 73% of the project be deed restricted, locals first right of refusal. I think we're going to get a huge number of those units sold to locals. And I think our price points will be appealing. I think the units will be appealing, and that's based upon our experience at base camp shops and residences. So between the 2 of those, I think it's a huge community benefit for us. It gives us the ability to get the project, you know, financed because it's not overwhelmingly heavy. And again, if you agree with us, it's a permitted use. Those are entirely voluntary. Then there's a site grading, development and drainage staff condition, just saying, you know, we gave a written response and they want to incorporate that in, saying, great, that's a condition of approval, that's fine. Then I talked about the work with staff on articulation condition, which again was that the applicant shall be required to work with staff to resolve any remaining articulation issues consistent with planning commission findings that a wall is a wall, i.e. a wall is defined in Webster's dictionary. And the last one is that the sidewalk termination and crosswalk location, and Robert, this is kind of, you know, this is up to you, you know, be extended to the western edge of Meadow Drive. And so the conclusion then is that from our view, the location, oh my God, talk about a location that's perfect for this type of use with between a Whole Foods and the brewery and the other uses there and a transit center where people can park their cars and, you know, never need to drive anywhere. I mean, the location is superb for this. We feel we like the architecture. We think it's better than any other buildings we did in base camp, that people like the other buildings. We think it's an improvement over base camp shops and residences. And a couple of commissioners talked about how they like that. It certainly has more articulation than base camp shops and residences. And then we think this completes, this is kind of the missing tooth in base camp. And so this completes base camp. We're done. We're willing to, we're willing to voluntarily make a huge voluntary housing contribution. And we're willing to accept all of staff's proposed conditions of approval. So then where does that lead us? That leads us to page 23, where staff has given you a recommended motion. And we just respectfully suggest changing one word in that motion. And that word is from deny to accept. And the only other thing I'd say is the offer on the housing is kind of a attention Kmart shoppers. We need to know tonight. I mean, it's a great offer. And what, you know, we want your support because we want to get going on this right away. You know, if we don't have your support, we're going to lose the season. And with 9% inflation, you know, you add significantly. So, you know, unfortunately, time's of the essence. And that's it. So that's it, guys. Okay.
Jessica, do you have any questions for the applicant?
If you could explain how this meets the use of a condo hotel, that would be great.
Well, if you look at the permitted use table, and then, you know, it says condo hotel permitted use, and then you go, what's the definition of a condo hotel? And you look at the definition of a condo hotel, and it says, you know, it has a management structure, and then there's a couple other words with that. And so we believe that it meets that definition, spot on. And I would just add, I appreciate people bringing in the other definitions. And we also went and looked at other jurisdictions, and what was really interesting uniformly, first of all, I don't think legally it's appropriate to look at other jurisdictions' definition, go, oh, well, they define it. No, you got to look, you're stuck with your code, it's, we have to work within the four corners of the code we have. But what's interesting.
For background, we will be deciding based on our code language.
But here's what's interesting. In all the other ones, they talk about units, they talk about hotels, they talk about rooms. Frisco's definition is the only one that uses the word dwelling unit. So I'd say even if you could bring those in, it's a different bird altogether. And so we think it's a permitted use. We think it meets the definition straight on. But beyond that, voluntarily, we want to do what we heard you want, what we think the community needs, what we think will benefit the project, and do a serious commitment to a deed restriction. Did I answer your question? Kind of. Okay. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Questions for the applicant?
Just one about the parking. There's two parking areas. So the parking, the larger one, which is between you and the Alpine Inn, is there any way that we don't see Alpine Inn members or people that live at the Alpine Inn that are parking in your spots? I mean, because there is no gate. I don't think there's any difference in elevation. It just looks like it was almost continuous.
The benefit of that would be, in your mind, in terms of segregating those two uses, would be what?
Well, that your parking spots stay with your project.
I see. Okay. Ronnie or Tom, do either one of you guys have any comments on that?
Microphone.
Yeah, thank you. Well, okay, it can be designated, but I wrote, when we did base camp shops and residences, there was a bunch of things, we did a lot of innovating at base camp. And, we weren't sure a couple things were going to work out. We tried it out. One thing was on the parking in front of base camp shops and residences. And it depended upon Vail Health and the downstairs tenants using the parking spaces during the day, and then the residents using them during the night. What could possibly go wrong with that, right? Especially when you have, 2 feet of snow some morning. You know what? It's worked out. We've got signage, there's communication within the HOA. And so it works out and people resolve it. So I would suggest we just do the same thing here. You have signage, and then if somebody's violating the signage, you just start enforcing it.
Okay. That's it.
Robert, questions for the applicant?
The 8 units you're talking about, are they spread throughout? Or are they all just lumped together in one part?
That's a great question. And our thought is to, just in every instance, every project we've ever done, we spread out. In other projects, we have 20% market, 80% restricted. We spread them out so nobody can tell which is restricted, which is market. And so we do the same thing here in terms of which units or which, until we get further along and do the pro formas and whatnot, I don't know which
And those units would be deed restricted under the restriction that the town of Frisco has on all deed restricted units.
Well, the restriction we proposed, that restriction is, and I don't know if it's in the packet, but we've given it to staff. It's we actually created the deed restriction, which is now, when we first started Wellington, that's kind of commonly used in the county now. It's similar to that with one exception, and that is the language is really similar in terms of identifying, who's a local and how do you determine they're local. We want to discourage this being a remote working site, so having them vote and maybe some other indices, we're open to those, are important. But in terms of where they're located, no. What it won't have though is an appreciation limit, and it won't have income qualifying. And so we did that at peak one, where I'd say 20% of the units where we called them live work. So locals could live there, but they had to be locals. But in terms of appreciation, they were whatever they
The
were.
answer is no, they're not going to meet the standard of deed restricted in the county.
Just restricting the sale to a 30-day right of first refusal. And you read those stuff, right? And then the second would just be the no STR. So that's what was reviewed.
Yeah, but he's talking about adding 8 units with deed restrictions, but not full deed restrictions.
We haven't reviewed.
Yeah, to me, this seems like substantial changes.
Yeah.
to what I've read in my staff report prepared for this evening that I'm hearing now that are not presented, not reviewed. So to me, that would say it
so
would be
that's-
need to be resubmitted under those conditions, not just applying those conditions to as hearsay.
Can I say one other thing on that, or?
Yes.
Robert, you probably understand this, but I personally am not crazy about the income caps and these other things. I think the market can drive it. What deed restrictions do is, in a normally functioning, healthy market, the value of homes is determined by what local wages are. And so in Frisco, that's distorted because you have all these people from Houston and New York coming in there. So as soon as you put on the local deed restriction, you've shrunk the market, and that can have a profound effect in terms of pricing and who ends up living there.
I appreciate it. I'm an economist, so.
Okay, well, good.
I actually like the deed restrictions that the county has. I understand some of the problems with it, but it allows for long-term livability of units in the county. Otherwise, what has happened over the last 2 years would make most units unaffordable for most people in a 2-year window, and that means deed restrictions are out the window again. So anyway, that's.
Well,
neither
can I
here
throw
nor
out two
there.
other things since you're.
That's neither here nor there.
Important. I think what you're talking about does make sense. I think you're right. In every instance where I've ever seen that done, there's been heavy government subsidy. They provided the land, they've waived fees, they've done this and that and the other thing. In this case, you've got a private developer, private property proposing a voluntary deed restriction.
I understand that, that developer also came in with one project that would have required a special use permit, which would have given us some ability to ask for certain things. And then magically found something in our code, which probably will be out of our code real soon, to bypass our questions. So as much as I respect everything that you've done in Basecamp, and Basecamp's an awesome thing, I'm still uncomfortable. So I want to go to the next question, which is to follow up on Jessica's question. Tell me about the management structure of the condo hotel.
Can staff pull up the what we submitted there? Ronnie, do you have that, the narrative submittal that we have?
I know it was in my packet. I want to hear the narrative of how this runs.
Was it in your packet that you submitted, Ronnie?
Yes, it is in the packet that was submitted. I believe Michael Marchand might be able to help identify, where that was located.
Emily, is it in your packet? Can you pull it up?
I don't have it on this computer. It's on the shared drive.
Do you have one of your computers? Sure.
Or the
And if you do, we can
Online.
get you set up on the lectern there.
I mean, I more than just showing me a piece of paper, I want to hear you articulate how this management is going to operate in this condo hotel.
Well, as a practical matters, you've got a management structure. And so that's where you'd run the HOA out of. So that would be the HOA office. And that would be a, really positive thing for an HOA to have a real, Basecamp Shops and Residences does not have that. And so that would be a positive thing. So you have that. The HOA would be handling, coordinating making sure enforcing the restrictive covenant, taking care of the maintenance and other things. And then in terms of rentals of the non-deed restricted units, and by the way, my personal bias is if the market would allow us to do it, I would prohibit short-term rentals on the whole project. However, until we're into the market, we're not going to make that commitment to you guys. So we're assuming there would be short-term rentals. And so then we would set up, we've got an app we're developing that would handle the short-term rentals and coordinate that. It's kind of It's just, it's not different than other, I don't want to use a name.
And short-term rentals would be, centrally managed and centrally controlled, and no one could short-term rent outside of the central government.
If you wanted it that way, we could do that.
Well, I'm thinking hotel, so condo hotel, which is what you're
Mm-hmm.
talking about.
Well, a hotel though,
A hotel, you call the front desk and you make a reservation.
with all due respect, the hotel, you can go through 20 different services online.
Oh, I
And the
understand
last
that,
person
but-
you call is the front
But,
desk.
but it goes to one central place to book it.
It goes to one central place in the internet, God knows where to book it. And it's not at the front desk of the hotel.
We can argue about that, but otherwise a hotel would have a room booked 3 times and it doesn't. It is a centralized booking system.
It's centralized. You're absolutely, there needs to be a control mechanism, but that's controlled in the cloud somewhere,
But what
probably
I'm
by
saying-
Amazon.
But what I'm asking is, can an owner rent outside of that system?
As we anticipated, yes. If you felt that was important to say no, then we could make that no.
Okay, I'm done with my questions.
Patrick, questions for the applicant?
Yeah, so towards the end of your presentation, you made a statement, and I apologize, I can't quote this verbatim, but it was along the lines of one night only. This is a deal for today in terms of 8 deed restricted units.
Kmart.
Special.
They don't
Can you-
even exist anymore.
Sorry, can you just go ahead and clarify that for us?
No, I just-
want to
if-
know what our feet are in the fire for, based on your statement.
Well, there's no feet in the fire. I'm just saying that
It sounded a little like an ultimatum, so just trying to get clarification.
Tom, you got to,
I just want to
if you want to
understand,
take this over.
I just
you
want to
do it.
understand the
need to
intent.
talk.
I want to make sure that everybody else here gets exactly what we're talking about.
I've got a real problem that if we're going to build this thing and it's going to be economic and it's going to work, we need to get the show on the road. You know, when the show on the road means hopefully you all feel, hopefully 4 of you feel that this is a good project and that we will perform consistent with the way we've done 20 years on all the other projects we've done. That it looks good, it meets a need, it's going to be well executed, that it completes base camp, that's a perfect use next to, you know, this density with transit, et cetera, et cetera. And if you say, no, you know, we really want this or that or the other thing, and we're going to, you know, spend a couple months, I'll lose this season. That'll cost probably $500,000. Then let's talk about that voluntary contribution if that happens. So that's not a threat. That's a reality saying it's an incentive, I guess is a way to put it. It's an incentive based upon the economic realities of what we're dealing with. And it's funny as you say that, I don't know, Patrick, how long have you been in Summit County? I don't know.
Been here 12 years, but it's
So-
not really relevant.
Well, it is relevant in that you missed when we were getting Wellington approved, and everybody thinks these projects, everybody goes kumbaya, they're fantastic. Wellington, we got down to a 3-3 vote. And it was very contentious with the planning commission. Eric Mamula asked a question similar to what you were doing. And Eric went back and forth and he just said, damn it, we need the housing. And so he voted yes. The Wellington neighborhood resulted. Peak 1, we had the same thing. You know, on base camp, a Whole Foods market, the last meeting, you'd think that was a slam dunk. We had 70 people in here that were outraged, thought the deal was not fair, even though the town was going to get, you know, $1 million a year. We snuck out of there with a 4-3 vote. It's, you know, unfortunately, these processes are very difficult. So anytime I can create some incentive to try to keep it moving along, you know, I'll do that. So if it doesn't feel right, I apologize, but
We understand. We're just obliged to ask the questions.
okay, sure, I got it.
Additional questions, Patrick?
Thank
Lena, any questions for the applicant?
I have a few, but I hate to go there, David, but you started out your speech with an accusation. Saying that 2 of us were something immediately biased. So for the record, who are you calling out?
I'm not going to go there. I don't think it's relevant.
Well, you called 2 people.
All right, questions? Let's stick to the script here.
Who is it?
I'm not interested in building a record. I'm interested in building projects,
Okay.
you know.
But you're making accusations. You want us to work collaboratively, but you're accusing us off the bat, right off the bat. I'm sorry, I don't understand what the numbers. So 8 of the units, 8 of the 29
27% are your deed restricted light. The 30-day Summit County.
I wouldn't call that a deed restricted light. 8 of the units are a serious deed restriction in terms of it's got to be locally owned and locally occupied and a prohibition against short-term rentals.
Well,
That's a
you're-
serious deed restriction.
Is that not what?
It's not in our staff report. It's a finding of
So
Mr. O'Neill
confused.
from this evening, so.
I just want to clarify, the deed restriction.
You got to come up to the microphone if you're going to say something.
The deed restriction that we provided to staff, it explicitly says the 8 units, no short-term rentals,
Could you say
and
your
that,
name, please?
Michael Martian.
Thank you.
Yes, no problem. It explicitly states that the 8 units that will be deed restricted will be required to be occupied by a business or a local Summit County worker who is employed 30 hours a week in Summit County, no short-term rentals. It also explicitly states that all of the units will be under that right of first refusal for 30 days, while the locals have their option to exercise the purchase. So that is in your packet in the deed restriction that we provided.
So 8 of the units or all of the units? All 8?
Let me,
Sorry.
so 8 of the units are going to be, have the locals restriction where you got to be locally owned, locally occupied. That's a tough restriction, and no short-term rentals.
So somebody that works in the county a minimum of 30 hours a week is what I saw in the.
Correct. And I'm really open to that because when we're doing, say, a Wellington or Peak One, we need to let some remote workers in there to sell houses. In this case, I think we could really get tough on the deed restriction to go, no, this is for bricks and mortar. I mean, this is for, people that actually work here. It's not a remote workstation.
Okay,
And-
so that's 8 of the 29. What's the remaining?
And then the
amount?
21 units that remain would have a first right of refusal. So we put those out there for 30 days to locals before we sell them. And that would be in perpetuity. So, and we did that. We did a similar thing at Peak One, except it was staged upon where first you had to live in Frisco. They got first shot, then 10 Mile.
Priority system.
Yeah, priority systems.
So, okay, so I'm gonna say it, make sure I understand. So the first
Thank you.
8 units are restricted to people that work in the county 30 hours a week. 30 hours a week on average. And no STRs.
But not a cap.
Yeah,
That's exactly right, Robert. And
no appreciate, okay.
Right.
No income cap, no appreciation cap.
Right.
Just work in the county. 30 hours a
identical to
week
what we
and no
did
STRs.
at Peak One on the live work units.
Okay. And the next, the last 21 have a first right of first refusal. Was that in our packet? Was that the? deed
Yeah, that's in
restriction
there. That was
the
in
packet?
there. Yeah.
Okay, so that one was also for 30 days. It has to be sold to or
Offered.
open to,
Offered,
offered
yeah.
to people that work in the county.
Yeah, and it's a practical matter. The way that would work is we've always used a Pioneer program. And so we get people, they put down $100, it's refundable anytime. So we'll have a list of people, that are interested. And then
The
we,
unit goes For sale, who qualifies these people? And I guess where I'm going with this is, I feel like what you're proposing is not fully baked. And I wish that instead of, I do agree, that sounded like an ultimatum, Walmart special. Take it or leave it tonight or else.
Mhm.
And it just doesn't feel like it's baked.
well,
feels
say
like-
it, I kind of disagree with that. I don't know anybody that has sold more deed restricted units, private developer in the county than we have. And so we wrote the deed restrictions, they work. And so to say it half baked, I don't buy that.
I'm
In
saying
terms of the
This, what you're proposing to
manage
us.
it, we'd manage it exactly the same way. And so we'd probably get the Summit County Housing Authority to qualify people the way we always did it before. And we'd probably do it again, depending upon what staff wants to. As the Summit County Housing Authority, somebody would do a loop through there, do an affidavit. They'd be, Summit County Housing Authority would sign off on it. We go, great, sell them the unit. And what's also
None of that
interesting,
is Spelled out in your deed restriction, and that's what I mean about this is not fully baked. Your deed restriction was like 5 pages long, of which 4 were legalese. So anyway,
it's almost
that's my
identical to
first
the Peak
question.
One deed restriction, however.
No, it really isn't. Like, no. The other question I have for you is, when we were here at Sketch, pretty much the entire planning commission, as we're talking about working collaboratively, we all said, we're really uncomfortable with this condo hotel concept idea that you pulled out because it happens to be in our code. We wanted you to
come work with us truthfully and honestly on what you're actually proposing. And you didn't do that. So I'm wondering why.
Well, I don't think it's fair to say that I wasn't truthful and honest in terms of dealing with you. And I think it gets more down to the public sector and the private sector working together, you get a much better result. The way we go through life, we focus on the vision. We focus on what are we creating here? You know, what's the project going to look like? We think there's a great looking project. We think the use is really going to work well. We think, you know, it's going to complete base camp, all these things. So hold on, let me finish, please. How we get there, we're less concerned about. We think we're getting there in a way that's consistent with the code, consistent with the law, and we get there and we get the project. You know, whether it's this or whether it's that, we think it's a great project. And that's what I'd want you all to make a decision on. You go, you know what? Okay, you know, this was kind of like making sausage, but we love the result or we don't like the result and vote accordingly.
A lot of the stuff that you're suggesting, you're saying, hey, I want to put a condition of approval on there that I'm going to work with staff. But you didn't work with us. I don't buy that you're really going to work with staff on anything. So I feel like, again, this should have been more responsive to our feedback and also more cooked before it got to us.
Yeah, so I guess, again, you're focusing on process and I appreciate that. That's, you know, what you do for a living. I focus on what's the outcome here? Is this an outcome that makes sense? Is this an outcome that's, you know, going to work? And I think, yes, does it meet all the intent of the code? Yes. Does it meet the code with that one finding on walls? Yes. So in terms of outcomes, if people vote on outcomes, that's what I'd like to hear. You know, if everybody says, okay, this wasn't as clean as we like, it's never clean. I've never had one that's simple. They're always painful.
I've seen ton of them that are clean.
Well, our problem is we're always innovating. We're trying, you know, nobody had ever done a Wellington before. Nobody had done Peak One project like that before. Nobody had done a base camp before. You know, we're always trying to figure out how can we get to the result, you know, that makes sense. And you know what, staff is never happy with us. It's consistent. They're not happy with us, but you know what? When we win the awards and the project's winning, they go, you know, the project's pretty good. And consistently, you couldn't point to a project we've done that has not won awards or that staff is not proud of.
Is there an answer to the question? This is getting very verbose. Like, I get you've done a lot. We appreciate that, but
Question.
if there are no further questions, we'll reserve for comment.
Yeah, I guess there are no more questions.
Andy, questions for the applicant?
No, I guess what I have are not necessarily questions for the applicant. And I want to start off by saying, I don't know if I was one of the people you think are biased against your project, because I read a report that is pretty negative about your project. I live in the People neighborhood. I love your projects. I think you do great stuff. We just want to see this be as good as everything else you've done. So I don't know that anybody up here is predisposed to a decision, but the staff report, we put a lot of faith in our staff. And the fact that you couldn't come to agreement with the staff, I think says a lot about what that process must have looked like. My question is maybe more for staff right now, because I think that the applicant team has sort of given a counterpoint to your parts of the report that claim it doesn't meet the standards. And I would like to give the staff a chance at some point, if it needs to happen after questions during comments, but I'd like to hear staff's response to the facade standards, the public amenities, and the deep eaves that staff report says don't meet the standards and the applicant thinks do. I'd like to hear your side of that.
Is that appropriate now, or should we do public comment?
Let's do public comments and then we can stop
Questions, and then before we do comments, let's have you kind of give us, do you have additional questions for applicants? Any additional questions? I do not have any questions at this time. They've been asked.
Thank you very
for
much.
your
And
presentation.
I appreciate the clarification. I'll just tell you, by virtue of the questions and the body language, I feel like everybody's totally engaged and has an open mind. And thank you very much for that, everybody. So.
Thank you. At this time, I will open the floor up to public comment. If there's anybody here that wishes to speak on this agenda item, now is your opportunity. Looks like everybody in the chambers is a part of the development team and nobody online. So I will close the public comment portion of this agenda item and pass the floor to you, Susan.
Sure, and how can I help? It sounds like you have some question about why.
Well, he pointed out what he thinks the way that you're interpreting the code to come
Yeah.
up with these areas that don't meet our standards.
Sure thing.
So maybe start with what you think a wall is.
And I think I would,
Let's figure out why
I would-
we think it doesn't meet the articulation.
We think that the wall is different than.
Your voice is not picking up on the microphone.
Okay.
can
My
you,
apologies.
Emily, can you put up page 17 of the,
Yes.
I'm picking on this page because it's the most clear example.
Yeah, I just want
Um,
to see where the town feels specifically the standards aren't being met.
Can you hear me, Calvin?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you'll notice on the upper, or on the floor plans for this building, the top of the page is facing, the interstate is facing north, and it's, tiny font, but you can see that it's a facade length that's well over 54. It's about 161 linear feet. And so wherever we have a building, according to our town code and the way we have consistently interpreted it, is if there is a building wall with a length that's over 54 feet, it needs to have breaks of at least 4 feet in depth and 6 feet in width, no less than every 27 feet. And so when I look at this, I can just tell at very first glance that this is not meeting that requirement.
This one,
Yeah.
you're the edge of grade.
Yeah. And we do have conversations with applicants a lot about the fact that, well, my building is moving, what you're looking at there is the handrail or, but the issue is that if you go back to why we originally even, the intent behind this code was that so we wouldn't have that continuous wall plane, even if it's a deck. We pointed at buildings in Frisco Central Core where we said, hey, these decks and these handrails that come out and it's all on a continuous line, that's not articulation. That's not what we want to see. And so we said, okay, let's do this. Let's write these standards this way. And so as we look at this building, you can just tell by first glance that this facade is definitely not meeting either for the measurements that were set out in that.
Correct to suggest that implied wall is a continuous plane of building elements.
And we
Because
call-
that's kind of what we're talking about, right?
And I believe that would be fair, I think. And the language that we use is kind of a horizontal plane language as opposed to,
That would be the language.
so it's geometric planes is kind of the language that's used, but building walls and geometric planes. And then we talk about total facade length, total building length. And I know that something we've worked on with a lot of applicants, and we usually are pretty successful in coming to an agreement on projects where we're able to help them meet the code in a way that works for their projects so that we can move these projects forward. Don has worked consistently with the applicant over the past several months and was unable to reach a place where he felt comfortable meeting this provision in the code.
If anybody wants to follow up on that, I also want to hear about the public amenities that we seem to disagree on. Staff report says there are 0.
Sure, so the DPUs is literally just a 24-inch minimum overhang, and that was a measurement that we took off of the plans that were submitted. There fully could have been an error in the, or a change, between the plan submittal sets, but the measurements that we took for that north facade and for the east facade of the smaller building they weren't providing.
They were less than 24.
For less than 24. And then the
The public amenities.
the public
mentions.
amenities, honestly, I have the feeling that was a miss on the read on the part of staff.
Okay.
And then if I could just touch on the deed restriction. So what we were submitted, we put in your packet. And so you guys have the deed restriction that we have and our understanding or our interpretation of it. And I see it's in Article 1. restrictions, and I know you guys have worked with these a lot, they can be complicated and it helps. We almost need an attorney to interpret them half the time, but, our understanding was that there were two separate things happening. That one is that we were restricting the sale for 30 days. The Summit County resident or Summit County permanent resident. And then after that, it could be sold to or leased to anyone. And then the second thing that was happening for just the 8 units was that it would not be allowed to be short-term rented for a period of less or rented at all for a period of less than 6 months.
So
That's our.
There was no restriction on market value or anything like that.
No.
It's documented.
restricted.
With. Yeah.
Market rate or whatever.
Yeah.
That's the way I'm interpreting this today. Like I said, an attorney might read it differently and it may benefit to have.
What has changed tonight from what's in our packet? Are you saying that there are different things that are not in our?
I just wanted to
Spoken, I did read that in our packet, and I was just hearing something different, so it sounded like.
I just wanted to clarify that that's what we
Yeah.
have. Okay.
Yeah, well.
Just for that,
I think there are two things that are different in your packet. One is that we're getting really serious with the deed restriction. And so instead of having the deed restriction light over the whole thing, we're going, no, 8 units are going to have real teeth. Okay.
That was in the packet.
Was that in the packet? Okay, okay. So, so that wasn't a change. And the other thing was, I think, and this is something that just became clear to me, it's been clear to Tom and Ronnie all along, is this idea of a wall, is a wall. And if one comes to the conclusion a wall is a wall, then all the problems go away. And then I go common sense. I think this is something new. You look at the building and you just go, does this have enough articulation or not? You go, wow, this is really articulated. Then you look at you try to reconcile it with the code. If you do the wall as a wall interpretation, then everything fits. If you go, the wall is not a wall, and with all due respect, we're looking at geometric planes, we're looking at this and that,
all right,
there's
we just
spatial.
needed clarity on
Okay.
that deed restriction. Sorry, we've had this back and forth.
So Susan, I'm looking at their site plans. Okay. It's the one with the 21 unit office building, this one.
Okay. What page are you on, Robert?
I think that's A011.
011. Okay. Let me go to your page.
It's down a ways. That's the backside that faces, and that's the geometric plane we're trying to break up, correct?
The bottom of the elevation there.
Right.
Correct.
So that geometric plane is solid, and that's what we always try and avoid doing with all of our buildings.
Correct.
And because that faces the interstate, that we don't like that look particularly
So it's
for,
both that facade and then it's also the east facade of the smaller building.
okay, I don't have that one up, but okay. I just wanted to make sure I understood what,
Okay.
it's not a wall, it's a geometric plane that we care about,
And this is the way we've applied it to.
right?
Any other clarifying questions from staff, from anybody, before we move on to comment, discussion?
I don't either.
You have any comments or discussion items for us that your thoughts on the overall project, Jessica?
I appreciate.
We'll take 1 minute break.
During this recess, I would just mention, some of the people who are on from the development team have been having difficulty hearing. So just making sure that either your microphone is facing or that you're leaning in when you speak.
It would be helpful, and I don't know how the town council feels about this. Be helpful to have longer microphones.
They were gonna give us little
I mean,
clip-ons,
This,
be hot mic.
I mean, for people with back trouble,
Yeah, but the other thing, really, do this a lot, is that there's an AV consultant who can probably retune these things.
I'm sure.
Yeah. The computer side of the equation, to make them more sensitive, just to make it better.
yeah.
My request is to make the
What's-
plan stop like being,
Flicker?
yeah, like I can't even watch it anymore.
Those lines.
Yeah. Yeah, they're better there, but on here it's like,
At least this,
Lower definition.
yeah.
at least this week I have a screen.
I know, where'd it go last week? Somebody took it
I don't
with
know.
them.
We plugged a new computer in today.
Oh, really?
All right. We will resume the meeting. Jessica, your comments, thoughts?
Appreciate the vision and the passion, and that was, I mean, that was a great presentation for something that I really do not think meets the code, but I think you did you got the passion across, absolutely. This is not a condo hotel, it doesn't meet that to me. You seem to gloss over that. You know, and I understand there's going to be controversy on visionary projects. I don't think coming with this project at this stage and comparing it, oh, there's going to be controversy. I don't think that's an apt comparison. You have, and then propose findings that you'll work with staff when you clearly haven't been able to work with staff. So I just don't think it's ready to get there. I think the vision could get you there, but you need to work within the constraints of the code and work with staff. So I would recommend denial.
Thank you, Jessica. Ira, thoughts, comments?
I appreciate the presentation. We learned quite a bit. I'm having the sense, and I'm still not sure, having both sides, if our packet is complete as to what was represented from Mr. O'Neill. It just sounded to me like there are some good things that you're putting out that really didn't appear in the packet, and the fact that has been pointed out that there hasn't been, warm and fuzzy between your conversation and staff leads me to be a little reluctant in my sense of it. I think that some of the articulation that you've put in there, some of it is very repetitive. So I think some of the views of the elevation facing the courtyard is very repetitive. I mean, it just doesn't seem to me to be genuine architecture. It just feels like certain shapes were moved to meet a definition, not to create real architectural integrity or interest. And I say that with some architects on board here, so I don't know. I was looking back at what we're tasked with in terms of housing and meeting needs, and it talks about balance of a dynamic and changing environment. And this may or may not be the place to say it, but the dynamic of our housing needs are really changing. Because when that was written, there were certain needs. And I think that the fact that you're coming in with workforce, I think is great. If it was up to me, I would give you more units if you made them all long-term rentals. End of the story. Beyond that, I would like to see a better working relationship between the project and staff so that we had a more clear path. Thank you.
Thank you, Ira. Robert.
I can almost get to the condo hotel piece. I don't like it. I hope we take it out of the code like next week. I can almost get there. Where I can't get to is, I'm not going to argue about a wall is a wall. I'm going to look at a geometric plane. I'm not an architect, but I know what a geometric plane looks like. And the geometric plane on this unit doesn't meet what I think we have as a standard for the town. And I scream about bulk planes all the time. And if I'm not going to allow bulk planes unless they're absolutely necessary, I don't think I'm going to go for a geometric plane that is as straight as this one is for as long as this one is. So that would be my first comment. And so the other would be, as my fellow commissioner said, is this project may not get a full vote or a vote from all the commissioners voting yes or no on this project at some point. I mean, you may have disagreement, we may have disagreement ultimately, and that's fine. But I've got to feel like you've worked with staff in good faith. And worked within the geometric plane rather than arguing about the definition of a wall. The 8 units, I appreciate. However, it appears to me that deed restricting those 8 units and not putting a cap on them doesn't create a long-term benefit for the county or for the town. Because it means that the next time that they go on sale, they'll probably be out of range from anyone who could afford them. So I'd like to see those units be in more in line with what we have done throughout the county. The last thing is that, you know, if you had continued down the road of requesting this project with a special use permit, I actually think you'd have gotten further faster, rather than coming back with this condo hotel and making all of us kind of feel queasy in our stomachs. And I would have been very comfortable with having some discussion about a special use permit with some things like the 8 units or something. And now I feel like it just feels awkward. So this project, in my opinion, isn't ready yet to come. I want to see things like deed restrictions in the packet. And I want the articulation taken care of. I would vote for a continuance rather than a pure denial.
Patrick.
So first, I mean, I want to commend you guys for Base Camp and the other developments that you guys have mentioned. I'm very familiar with all those. I watch them. I know people that live in all them. It's awesome. I mean, those are great projects. This is not about that. This is specifically about what's being proposed today, right? So, you know, with that, you know, our staff, they do a fantastic job of vetting all these proposals and looking at the spectrum of things that are proposed for the entire town of Frisco that were and that are to help interpret our code. And, you know, I think it's a little unfortunate that we're here and it feels like this was forced, this conversation, as opposed to working through the staff, which some others have mentioned. Not the only one probably who thinks it's been incredibly litigious, as opposed to sort of a collaborative conversation this evening. I think we should, you know, better way to approach the project going forward. You know, the wall is a wall thing. It's kind of legal jargon, but the issue is that it's about, does it meet the intent of the code? Code is not, unfortunately, building code isn't really the law. It's a little bit subjective or interpretive, up to really the town, right? So to that intent, are we meeting the intent of the code? And I think that there's parts of this that are not. There's 6, perhaps 7 things in the staff report that are identified by staff as not meeting the intent of the code. So for me, at that high a number, even if you dismiss 5 out of 7, there's still issues that need to be resolved. So I think taking a closer look at all of those and the interpretation of the code and staff will take this all the way to the fun. I believe there's a totally solid project here. I think it can happen. I think we're just saying right now that it's not quite ready.
Thank you, Patrick. Well said. Lena?
Yeah, so love the Pequot neighborhood. Half my friends live there. Thank you for housing them. And it's a very cute neighborhood. I love Whole Foods. My $8 tomato sauce is fantastic. I'm just kidding. I'm literally in there like every other day. So you know, just to echo, I really do appreciate, I do think that you have brought some really cool developments in Summit County and to Frisco. And I am not opposed to filling this in with these condos or townhomes or whatever you want to call them, but I feel like putting it out there as a condo hotel is just a lie. I think you started down the path of a conditional use permit because you knew that this is really a residential development. And so continuing on this road, the purpose of having these sketch plans and getting our feedback is so that you react to them, not to just continue on with just not doing anything that we ask you to do. So I think because of the way that we've always applied and interpreted that one standard on building facades, and that's the way that it's been applied to everybody, based on Susan's commentary. So I feel like we need to be consistent. And if that's the way it's been interpreted, that's the way it's been, we should continue to interpret it. So I agree with the staff on that one. I trust the staff on the measurement of the eaves. I can give on the landscape amenities if that was a mistake. But I also am not comfortable with adding conditions of approval that say, oh, that you are going to work with the staff when you haven't been working with the staff. So that doesn't make any sense to me. So I can go either way with a continuance or a denial, but I definitely don't think this is ready.
Thank you, Lena. Andy?
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add. I think everything's been said pretty well at this point. You know, I think I do think this is a good project for that spot. I think it makes a lot of sense. I agree, though. I think you were on the right track when you started calling it a residential project at the beginning. I think we all were pretty open to the conditional use idea over there. It seems like a good project for that, but the condo hotel, it doesn't feel like a condo hotel and it doesn't smell like a condo hotel to me either. So that's a tough one for me. But easier for me to wrap my head around are the articulation standards. And I get the discussions we've had on the walls. I think it's interesting that you brought up the Centura project because I had the exact same issues on that project. I felt like the railings and the storage units and the different areas constituted enough of a wall, enough of a geometric plane that it was a problem for me on that project. And it's a much bigger project for me on this project. I feel like especially that that north elevation that faces the interstate needs work. And I understand the voids and the solids to voids. But to me, just looking at it, not just in the 2-dimension, I know which can be deceiving, but when I look at it in 3 dimensions, it really feels like there's a whole lot of that on that plane. And I think we've been asking you guys to fix that right from the very beginning. I'm disappointed that it still looks that way. So yeah, I could probably continue it if you guys think that that you're ready to turn it around with you know, a much better staff report quickly. But I don't want to see it again looking like this for sure. So I would only be in favor of continuing it if we got some assurances that you guys are going to make some changes. So those are my comments.
Any additional comments? Thank you very much for all your time and your presentation, and I echo everyone's opinion. If it walks like a duck, looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a duck. This is residential to me. I think there's a community benefit of putting 8 deed restrictions in there and making it with the conditional use. And I agree. I mean, that's going to be the, you know, final piece in base camp. I think it's a great district to have our short-term rentals in with Outer Range and Whole Foods and the liquor store right there, you know, and it's a nice building with some final things that need to be addressed. And but I don't think it's condotel, and I don't think it's meeting our code and the intent of our code. So, I mean, I would support a continuous, but I also feel like it's going to have to be resubmitted under a residential application with a conditional use. Is my personal opinion.
Could they make a change to a residential unit and bring it as a major site?
They can continue their major site plan application and also apply for conditional use and just change the use designation under the site.
And the next possible time would be our meeting on the 18th.
I would recommend not tabling it to a date certain so that you give the applicant time to work with staff.
Well, don't they need to request a continuance or we take a vote?
If that's something that they would like, you can ask the applicant.
Do you wish a continuance or us to take a vote?
Gosh, let me think here.
First of all, I love everybody's feedback. Thank you very much. It's pretty loud and clear, so we would take the continuance.
Okay,
And the architects have assured me that they think there's some ways they can resolve the issue. And I just have to, I started out with a personal comment. And I've never had a planning commission meeting before. Everybody says, great presentation, we love your projects, denied, but that's okay.
want to be original here, I guess.
Well,
So we would go with the continuance and we would, given, you know, the attention came on choppers, that we worked with staff to, let's try to see you guys, you know, next earliest time and come back to the commission use. That looks like tweak the articulation, see if we can make the case. Let's get back, let's get it done.
Continuance,
So what date?
We're gonna keep it open.
Especially if they're gonna change the type of application, because we'll need to
That was my concern.
I'd move for a continuance, subject to, a date set by, between staff and the applicant.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
I
Aye.
think you gotta take a roll call.
Oh, do we have to take a vote, please, on the continuance, Cheryl?
Commissioner Franken,
Yes.
Commissioner Gleason,
Yes.
Commissioner Lesmes, Commissioner Potter,
Yes.
Commissioner Stabile, Commissioner Tain,
Yes.
Commissioner Withrow.
Yes. Thank
Motion
you. We look forward to
Can I
finding
make,
the,
can I make a comment?
yes.
I would say that, your projects have been phenomenal for the town. Make this one as phenomenal for the town. And we trust our staff. We go against some of their wishes sometimes, and we might, but not very often. So, you know, work with our staff and I think you'll have a good project.
Thank you very much for your time this evening. We look forward to seeing you soon. Any staff updates, or do we have a motion?
I have a question.
Yes.
I know this.
Stop being that guy in the class.
I know.
Well, can we-
Can I ask this question? I think we've asked it before. As much as I like what's happening with the hotel on Lusher Court. No. It's a big one.
Best West, yes, summer suites.
Suites.
Is that what it's called now?
That still feels like, that still feels white.
It's wrong.
And I thought that we said no white.
Just like Fourth and Granite. Thank you for hard.
not be a pure white. They submitted a
Lightest possible grade that you can get.
It is so white.
It is so white.
So, but actually, this is a follow on to that. Can we start some sort of a Google Doc or something with you guys where all of us can start dumping things for that council work session in?
good idea, yeah.
Color.
Yeah, like it seems, it seems like an hour, nothing can get accomplished and they slid us into their agenda and then they move right on. They don't.
Well, it's a dinner meeting, but it doesn't have to be the only meeting. Do you know what I mean?
Submit some things that like Patrick's saying, like, these are the items we'd like to address with you over time. Cause it sounds like they've kind of honed this one as housing.
I wouldn't say that at all.
Oh, okay.
I think we're open to discuss a variety of things. Housing is definitely then front and foremost on our minds.
But I'm just thinking if there was a Google Doc tracking list, because every time we do one of these meetings.
Yeah.
There's a couple of 2-3 salient things that come out that we ask ourselves, why is the code like that? Or I wish it wasn't. So if we started a list that's.
Double check,
Not
make sure
repetitive.
it's legit with,
Ex parte communication kind of thing.
but I don't see why not. That's why I suggested if you guys could just email us and then we can.
You
start a
guys
list.
compile a
We
list.
could send the list back out and it's.
So many things. I think we could all benefit from more work sessions, especially when we get to slower months. And less meetings, or like they come to one of our meetings.
The first meeting is just to say there's a list.
Hey,
That's
we're
it.
coming at you. We're coming for you.
Or like, what's the process for amending the code? Let's talk about that. Like, if we talked about process for amending the code,
We don't need to talk about that with town council.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about some code amendments that we should discuss instead of saying, I hate hearing that, or I hate that this isn't a part, like the deck snow storage to me just. I bring it up every time because I'm like, I think it's this important.
Should be,
Or the color thing.
should be heat tape on all decks.
Yeah, but the problem is they can abandon them and then there's still no like supplemental storage.
I was on the base camp building, on the Pinnacle building.
Have you seen the grouch on,
Yeah, well, or you drive-
she was like, what do you mean? I'm not building it, I just designed it. You're like, you should drive up and see a design
The new one we just put in there?
on Fourth and Grand, the white.
Materials.
I know, but they were poorly executed.
That's still, there's still another conversation I think about that.
Yeah,
Let's go back and review the approved permit application set and see exactly. If it does not show white grouch, I think we ought to remediate that.
I don't think it did go white.
I don't think. It probably showed up. I don't think any of us would.
yeah.
We wouldn't have approved that. And that project's not that long ago.
I'm gonna make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you all. Meeting adjourned.
As it unwinds and-
I know, then we're all like, oh, let's get fired up. I'm always like, what is said after the meetings? It's probably like, check out this building on Fourth. I don't even know. You haven't seen it. You can't even tell what design it is. You're like, you're going for French farmhouse or modern.
You're like stone, I don't care, and the white ground next to.